Call the meeting to order of the Wilmington City Council. I'd like to welcome all those who are with us here this evening and all those who are at home watching us on TV. This time I'd like to introduce our chaplain, Leona Joins, of the Wilmington Police Department, to give our invocation. If everyone will stand and remain standing afterwards for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Jones?
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you today to say thank you for this day. We thank you, O Lord God, for your grace and your mercy. We thank you, O Lord God, for who you are. Father God, right now, as this meeting come to order, we thank you for the mayor of this city, the city manager, the city attorney, all the councilmen and women, and all the people of this community. We thank you, Lord God, that everything will be done in decent and order, and everything decision made, that it will be right in your sight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a presentation this evening, a presentation of the Greenfield Park Master Plan. At this time, I'd like to recognize Shweta Nankar, who's the project manager and consulting team of McAdams.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Greenfield Master Plan today. The agenda for tonight's meeting includes sharing the master plan process, the project framework, and project goals. We will discuss the story of Greenfield Park through the lens of its legacy in the past, its present, and share the vision for its future. We have developed recommendations for each of these three lenses. In the end, we will have some time for questions. This slide shows the overall master plan process. The project design team conducted site due diligence through the review of previous plans, research into the history of the park, and conducted site visits to understand the ground conditions. We conducted robust community engagement in collaboration with the city staff. The findings from these tasks were included to develop the conceptual master plan and the recommendations related to operations and future updates. And we are here today to share these recommendations with you all. The Greenfield Park Master Plan was undertaken with few key goals in mind. Several of them related to operations, such as addressing the staffing needs, landscape and maintenance, safety of the users in the park, identification of capital projects, and acknowledging the need for highlighting the park's 100th anniversary that's coming up in the next year. This slide shows the framework that we established for the project. Storytelling is a critical component of this unique park with close to 100 years of history. We wanted to highlight and celebrate that legacy by ensuring that the initial recommendations focus on the preservation and enhancement of the critical assets, ideally within the first 5 years. We are calling this the down payment on the investment the city is making to improve and enhance this park. The assets or the amenities that are not historically critical and do not need immediate maintenance and improvements will be the focus in phase 2, which is from 6 to 10 years, and these will focus on the continued high-quality experience in the park through proactively addressing the operations and maintenance of the park facilities and amenities. Park activation will be achieved through additional programming and focusing on attracting new users to the park. The level of investment is continued mortgage payment by implementing small-scale aspirational projects. And lastly, we focus on envisioning the future of Greenfield Park for the next 100 years. And this includes larger-scale aspirational projects and bigger improvements, identified in the plan as value creation for the level of investment in phase 3, which will extend beyond the 10 years. This slide might be a little bit hard to read, but the larger printout should be in your agenda packet. Greenfield Park's legacy lies in the incredible stories it has witnessed over the last century, and through this project, we are highlighting that and the park's importance in the community as a destination recreation space. As you can see, the park's history extends well before 1925, where it was visitors were allowed on the property to enjoy the lake and a privately owned amusement park. After Greenfield Park was turned to the city, it continued to ascend its place as a recreation destination for residents. Its beauty captured through the photographs and the postcards illustrates how beloved this park was in the last century. And it continues to do so today. It's an active recreation resource. It's an environmental and natural resource, and it is a hidden gem that is historic resource for the community. Currently, Greenfield Park is 250 acres of property, which is close to 90 acres of Greenfield Lake. Major amenities at this park include amphitheater, boathouse, skate park, and the 5-mile trail loop, among others. The trail loop is the highlight for many park users. In the growing urban environment of the city, this property stands out as a natural oasis. It's a refuge for urban wildlife, a demonstration site for the coastal ecology. While this park is well loved, the challenges we observed during site observations included aging facilities, need for management of invasive species, and also a need for addressing the perceived safety by providing more eyes in the park. With assistance from the Parks and Recreation Department staff, we could reach out to more than 1,000 residents across the city. The following few slides will summarize what we heard. The top 3 reasons people visit the park are the use of 5-mile loop, events and concerts at the Hugh Morton Amphitheater, and the trails within the park. People would like to prioritize improvements to restrooms and the 5-mile loop, followed by the shelters and the picnic areas. The biggest concerns people expressed included the perception of safety and the lack of maintenance and supervision. And finally, our online and questionnaire survey included a mapping exercise where we asked participants to put a dot on the map where they enjoy and feel safe. The large green dots are the spaces where people enjoy the most: the amphitheater, the Lions Bridge, the boat launch, and the fragrance garden area. And then the counter question was where these spaces are where you feel less safe, and the answers included the shelters, the sunken garden areas, and certain locations along the 5-mile loop where it is adjacent to the road, or if it is meandering through the dense vegetation, making it harder to have clear sight lines. We synthesized our findings from the site due diligence, site visits, and community engagement results, and developed a new phrase for the master plan to envision a century of new memories by honoring the past, embracing the present, and transforming its future. And the way we have it set under the 3 buckets of framework include the recommendations that I shared earlier. The first one is for 0 to 5 years to address the critical needs. Second one is between 6 to 10 years to budget for the important improvements. And the third one is to continue the investment in aspirational improvements so that the park legacy can continue over the next 100 years. So for the next 5 years, the project identified to be implemented include deploying the crime prevention through environmental design, scepted techniques, addition of lighting and cameras to enhance the security, vegetation management to clear the sight lines, improve accessibility on trails and pathways within the park, the 5-mile loop resurfacing, Lions Bridge replacement, etc. We have also provided the opinion of cost to accomplish these critical tasks. This graphic shows the tentative areas identified for the location for pedestrian lighting and security cameras. The graphic on the right shows the areas that need vegetation management. Our team also performed an operation assessment based on which we have made the following recommendations. The city will need to outsource the vegetation management for one time to bring the park to a manageable level by the city staff. We also recommend adding one grounds tech position and an additional park ranger position to ensure the high quality of park experiences for the visitors. The next phase of this park is to identify improvements and enhancements to be implemented over the next 6 to 10 years. This includes keeping up with the improvements undertaken in the first 5 years and building upon that to develop landmarks within the park, such as the amphitheater area, the park core area with playground, tennis courts, etc., and continue to host the events and programs to increase park activation. And based on these improvements, continue to proactively manage the staffing needs to maintain those park amenities. It is also important to note that Greenfield Lake is a critical ecological and environmental asset, and the need to care for the water quality continues to be a high priority. The slides illustrate specifically the vegetation management focus along the lake edge and within the park area. This shows the before and after scenario of what the continued vegetation management will create, connecting people to nature in more direct and meaningful ways. Phase 3 is the most aspirational in terms of recommendations. These are our suggestions, and they need to be validated through more focused community engagement. The diagrams illustrated on this slide, they show the focus on overall site organization, creating specific zones, such as a community zone in the present playground skate park area, the cultural zone in the amphitheater area, and the ecological zone in the southern side of the park. These 3 zones are also the main gateways to the park. The 5-mile loop becomes the thread that connects these zones, and it will be enhanced with additional nodes where users can find informative and wayfinding signage, mile markers, seating areas, and trash receptacles. These nodes will also provide clear and inviting views into the park site, specifically to the lake where the trail meanders along the lake edge. This slide illustrates the entire proposed master plan and the associated recommendations for future enhancements. The 3 landmarks that we identified for the community, culture, and ecology zones, they are named as Greenfield Gateway for the tennis court skate park area, Showcase Shore for the Hugh Morton Amphitheater area, and the Environmental Enclave for the southern part of the site, where currently only staff has access to. This slide shows the details of the Greenfield Gateway. The focus is on creating clear pedestrian circulation with an actual arrangement of amenities, a large event center, boathouse building, a new playground area, improved skate park area, and a new restroom shelter building with large open space for future events and programs. This slide shows the suggested enhancements to the amphitheater area, rethinking the street and access to this area, clear designated parking spaces, bringing focus to the large rotary wheel, and creating these unique open spaces that bring people together. This graphic shows potential options for what opportunities exist at the southern tip of the site, which is the most remote area of the park. The current abandoned parking lot can be revamped with a new trail node. The focus of this area can be ecology. So a nature-inspired play space, a new restroom building, which was mentioned in our community engagement. There is also a possibility to further enhance the space by creating a potential programming space where staff can provide supervision into this area during daytime. And this is what the park activation could look like when these recommendations are implemented over time. And in conclusion, this master planning effort was undertaken to assist the city in accomplishing the goals through incremental investment and phasing projects by identifying priorities for capital improvement projects. This master plan aims to improve the historic park, to make it safe, well-maintained, and memorable space within the community for generations to come by enjoying its past, embracing the present, and transforming its future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions? Very well thought out plan. Very
Thank you so
detailed.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Brings us to our consent agenda, items 1 through 2. Are there any items that any councilman would like to hear separately? If not, what are the wishes of council?
Well, C2.
C2?
Mr. Mayor.
Okay. We have a motion to approve item C1, which is the approval of the minutes. Yes, we do, from Mayor Pro Tem Councilman Reinbark, second by Councilmember Joyner. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. At this time, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Spears. Ms. Spears?
Mr. Manager, is the situation with Hannah Block the same as Stallion?
No, sir, not the same. And I'll ask Amy Beatty to come forward and give us a little more detail on it. But essentially, we are contracting for the management of that particular facility. And this particular facility, Thalian does not manage the entire building. They only manage the portions that the city doesn't occupy. But Ms. Beatty can probably answer more questions, or if you can be more specific with your curiosity, I'll be glad to try to.
I'm talking financially.
Oh, financially.
Yeah. Do we get any of that money? No?
Does the Thalian Association pay the city?
For Hannah Block, right? Do we own Hannah Block?
Yes, we do own Hannah Block.
Okay,
They
so-
manage the facility for us, and no, we do not get proceeds from there.
Okay, so the situation is the same?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Thank you.
yes.
That's it. Thank you, Ms. Beatty. It was so helpful. Make a motion to approve
We have a motion
C2.
by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our public information. We have 5 speakers that have signed up to speak with us this evening. Our first speaker is Krista Johnson, that will be talking to us about adding a resolution to the 2020-24 meeting agenda. Each speaker will be allotted 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Krista Johnson, and I'm one of the volunteer organizers for the ILM for Peace in Palestine Coalition. When we formed our group, the goal was to do whatever we could to advocate for peace, starting with an immediate and permanent ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and equal rights for Palestinians. As these last months have unfolded, we have watched in horror as Israel has carried out the collective punishment of Gaza with a blockade of food, water, and medicine, the indiscriminate bombing and destruction of hospitals, homes, and schools, and the murder and maiming of tens of thousands of people, mostly women and children, and we have all felt called to do whatever we could to call for peace. City Council was not our first stop. In November, we held a rally outside this very building where hundreds of us gathered peacefully to call for a ceasefire. We've held interfaith vigils, praying for peace and mourning for all the lives lost. We've sung carols, we've held open education and discussion sessions, we've collectively made thousands of calls to our congressmen begging them to call for a ceasefire. We've signed petitions, we've written letters. We've done all this hoping that our government would listen and stop the funding and support of the State of Israel's brutal campaign, and they haven't. In fact, the U.S. Senate just awarded the State of Israel $14 billion taxpayer dollars in additional military funding. President Biden has funneled U.S. arms to the IDF without congressional approval or oversight. The U.S. just today has vetoed yet another UN ceasefire resolution. Despite our government's inaction, there is a diplomatic solution to this crisis. If the U.S. were to stop supplying weapons and money to Israel, this nightmare would end. We're appealing to you now because we need your help. We need you to use your position as our local elected leaders to amplify our voices and call for peace. Wilmington can join with the dozens of other cities, including Durham, Greensboro, Carrboro, in North Carolina, that have passed similar resolutions, cities that stood with their constituents and the majority of Americans that support a ceasefire. I understand that it's easy to stay silent. We're safe. Our hospital won't be bombed with airstrikes. Our children aren't in danger, and we're not starving. But we have an obligation and a duty to speak against this atrocity that is only made possible because our government is funding and supplying it in our names. Tonight, we are speaking during the public comment section of this meeting, and you have the luxury of not responding directly to us. But as our local government, you owe us open debate on this issue. In the time that it's taking tonight, in this 30 minutes, this council could have adopted and passed a resolution. We need to know where you stand. If we can't trust you to take the only morally defensible position on this crisis and demonstrate your leadership, then we can't trust you to make any decisions at all, not on budgets, zoning, ordinances, or any other city business. Please use your power and position that you have been entrusted with and stand with us to call for an immediate ceasefire. And consider this a formal request to adopt a ceasefire resolution and add it to the next council agenda with open debate. And I'd like to submit, or actually I'm kind of upset to submit a revised sample copy of our resolution. I had to update it to reflect the more than 1,400 additional people that have been killed since it was submitted at the last city council meeting 2 weeks ago. The death toll is now over 29,170 people. How many more people must be killed before you even consider speaking out? How many more meetings do we have to come to ask for you to just use your voice and your position to call for peace?
Next speaker is Ms. Ashley Daniels, who's speaking to us about the implications of 1898. Is Ms. Ashley Daniels in the yes?
My name is Ashley Daniels. I am also a volunteer organizer with ILM for Peace in Palestine. During the uprising that resulted from the murder of George Floyd, I came across a post online that said, if you've ever wondered what you would have done during the Holocaust, the Civil Rights Movement, or any moment in history, it's exactly what you're doing now. As you prepare now for November events to acknowledge the anniversary of 1898 massacre, I'm here to say to you tonight, Wilmington City Council, that what you are doing or not doing now is exactly what you would have done back then. The massacre of 1898 and the violence being levied upon Gaza are too similar to deny. To build a case for the war they are seeking, both the Israeli Defense Minister and Prime Minister referred to Palestinians as human animals and beasts. This assertion of a people as less than human is the same as the white woman suffragists characterizing black men as black rapists and ravening human beasts, and encouraging that black men be lynched 1,000 times a week if necessary. Israel declaring war on a people with no land army, no air force, and no navy is the same as the white supremacists who refuse to sell ammunition to black Wilmington residents before opening a reign of organized terror and bloodshed on black people in the streets, at their businesses, and at their homes. The burning and bombing of hospitals, homes, and refugee camps in Gaza, causing Palestinians to flee further and further into displacement, is the same as the burning of homes and businesses, causing women and children to flee to the swamps of Brunswick County for weeks. The forcible exile of Palestinians to Egypt and other parts of Africa and the Middle East is the same as the forced exodus that displaced black Wilmington residents from their rightful homes and businesses, and is still commemorated 125 years later. The violence of 1898 was not inevitable. Someone could have stopped it, but it was allowed, condoned, and ultimately supported by the inactions and silences of those in power. As your council prepares for yet another year of commemorating the massacre that did not have to happen to a people that have never received justice in a city that has never paid any reparation, I want to remind you that what you do now is exactly what you would have done back then. You can each act individually and sign on to the open letter for elected officials drafted by Muslim Women for and Jewish Voice for Peace, calling for a ceasefire. Your council has the power and the responsibility as elected officials and inheritors of the legacy of 1898 to join over 70 cities and towns across the United States in calling for a ceasefire of the violence being inflicted on the Palestinian people. The coalition before you, ILM for Peace in Palestine, has drafted a resolution and asked for an audience with you to support the passage of the resolution. The very least any of us can do is use our voices. If your ceremonial words about 1898 are sincere, you will use your voices individually and collectively to stop it from continuing to happen to another group of people. Thank you.
Next speaker is Ms. Erica O'Brien. Be speaking to us about a humanitarian crisis.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Erica O'Brien. I'm a resident, taxpayer, and active voter in Wilmington. I'm here with you tonight to ask you to discuss and adopt a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, an updated sample of which has been brought to you this evening. I'm a product of I am in part a product of North Carolina Public High School and the North Carolina Public University system. As a student, I became involved with the student-led division of the Genocide Intervention Network, a nonprofit organization aiming to empower individuals and communities with the tools to prevent and stop genocide, with chapters all across the country. Our organizing work centered on divestment campaigns and financial policy. As the education chair at UNC's chapter, I developed educational content covering genocide in recent history and connections to contemporary humanitarian crises and mass atrocities, primarily in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, and present-day South Sudan. I presented this content to high schools and college groups throughout the state and trained my peers to facilitate the program as well. I focused on education because I truly believed that the barrier between crisis and action was information. I believed that once people knew, they couldn't look away. We are looking at a genocide today in real time. Through screens and speakers in the palms of our hands, we bear witness to the violent, horrific reality that the Palestinian people are subjected to daily. More than 29,000 Palestinians have been killed by the state of Israel since October 7th. Over 12,000 of them children. Over 29,000 people. People that were planning weddings and birthday parties and family reunions and just starting college and families and jobs they were really excited about. They were just starting. 29,000. If that number seems abstract or hard to hold on to, it's a quarter of the population of Wilmington. Can you feel it? The enormity of that loss. It can be temptingly easy to think of this tragedy as distant, as unconnected to our daily lives here in Wilmington, that we are helpless in this crisis happening halfway across the globe, that what we do or say or vote on has no impact. But we don't live in that world, and we haven't for a very long time. It's our tax money that funds this genocide. It's weapons packages from our country, killing thousands and thousands of innocent people. Our silence in the face of that reality is tacit endorsement. Saying as a community, as a city, that we do not tolerate the intolerable be done in our name is not nothing. It shows our neighbors who we are, that we see their grief and we walk with them. It shows the generations that will live here after we are gone who we are, that in our moment, we stood on the side of love and humanity. The choice you make today is the legacy we're leaving them. As a city, we should give them a better one than the one that we were given. Thank you.
Next speaker is Ryan Twilford. Is Ryan here? Ryan Twilford? historically recognized locations to be added, the use of the endowment funds?
No, it's not me.
So is Ryan here, Ryan Twyford? Okay. Ryan Beecham. Call for ceasefire on Palestine.
Yes, thank you. At the City Council meeting on the 6th of February, 5 of you voted legal repercussions for some of the most vulnerable among us in this community who panhandle in the median of the road. One of you cited fear among the justifiable reasons for your actions. If fear is truly a motivator for this council's actions, please consider the fear and the terror being experienced by the Palestinians. Their home, their lands that they were born to, whose legacies and ancestors live within the soil, the trees, their traditions are being terrorized, are being bombed. Human beings are intentionally being deprived of food and water. It is U.S. aid, the use of our tax dollars, that continues to enable this genocide. And it is my fear that if we, as humans, forget our humanity in the pursuit of political optics, none of our lives are truly valued by this governing body. This city council exists in a lineage of white supremacy and state-sanctioned violence, infamous in its stance that not all life is of value, especially when individuals in government stand to gain from the violence of this inhumanity. My friends and I ask you to take the smallest step in addressing the long and abhorrent history the city of Wilmington has in addressing inhumane violence on vulnerable and truly afraid peoples. We ask you to sign and pass a ceasefire resolution on behalf of Wilmington. My name is Ryan Beecham.
That concludes our public information segment. Next item of business are public hearings. Item PH1 is an ordinance amending the official zoning maps of the city to rezone property containing 5.82 acres of land located at 6120 Oleander Drive from CBCD, Community Business Conditional District, to an ONI CD, Office and Institutional Conditional District, for a mixed-use development consisting of 178 dwelling units and 20,700 square feet of office and commercial space. This was continued from our October 3rd, 2023 meeting, as well as our February 6th, 2024 meeting. At this time, I'd like to recognize City Manager, Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Brian Chambers, our Assistant Director of the Planning Department, will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. This site is located southwest of the intersection of Oleander Drive, Greenville Loop Road. It's approximately 5.8 acres in size and includes the undeveloped portion of the Summerwalk project. This map shows the site within the surrounding area and then several photos of the subject property. There are some photos of the subject site from the surrounding roadways, Oleander Drive and Greenville Loop Road. And then we have some photos of the surrounding properties. You have the fire station directly to the west, offices located to the north across Oleander, the Phase 1 townhomes of the Summerwalk project to the south, single-family homes across Greenville Loop Road, and then a gas station located directly northeast of the property. This site is part of a larger mixed-use project that was originally approved by this council in 2010. That original approval included 140 dwelling units in Phase 1 and 80,000 square feet of office space in Phase 2. In 2015, City Council approved a rezoning for Phase 2 of the project, which allowed limited commercial uses and then allowed for two-story buildings totaling 62,400 square feet. As you can see, Phase 2 was never constructed. And the proposal before you this evening is to rezone Phase 2 to a new office and institutional conditional district to allow for a mixed-use project that includes 178 dwelling units and 20,700 square feet of office and commercial space. The current proposal includes 3 four-story buildings. Building A along Greenville Loop Road includes parking on the ground floor and residential units above. Building B fronting Oleander Drive includes parking and commercial on the ground floor and residential units above. And then finally, Building C, also fronting Oleander, it includes commercial uses on the first and second floors with residential uses above. The commercial uses on this site would be limited to business services, banks, restaurants, retail, office, and personal services. The project would set aside 20 units for workforce housing for a period of 15 years. There is an existing transit stop on Oleander Drive, and there is a condition added to this report that requires the applicant work with Wave Transit to make improvements to that stop. Access would be provided by a right-in, right-out driveway on Oleander, and there would be an existing driveway, Richard Bradley Drive, to the south, which provides access to Greenville Loop Road. A traffic impact analysis was approved for this project, which identifies a number of required improvements of the surrounding road network. The North Carolina Department of Transportation also has a funded project for this intersection. It includes a majority of these required improvements. The NCDOT project improvements are shown on your screen. The project is scheduled to begin property acquisition in 2027 and construction in 2029. A condition has been added to this report. The request that stipulates that all the required road improvements must be completed prior to receiving final zoning approval for this project. Here's the proposed elevations provided by the applicant. Our comprehensive plan identifies this site as within a greenfield site area of opportunity, a mixed-use center, and along a high-capacity transit route. The plan calls for development to occur in a compact pattern and reinforces the efficient provision of public services and utilities. The plan calls for quality development that provides for an increase in density within infill areas, including mid-rise buildings and the use of structured parking. And the plan also calls for an increase in housing options and supports higher density development along our priority transit corridors. The proposal provides an appropriate transition between the high-intensity uses along Oleander Drive and the residential areas to the south. It includes a mix of uses that provide additional services to the area. It does provide additional housing options for the area and also includes a workforce housing component. The proposal would also add residential density along our high-capacity transit route, which would in turn help contribute to the required demand to operate transit services in this area. Staff believes this request is consistent with our comprehensive plan. The request is reasonable in the public interest, and we are recommending conditional approval. The Planning Commission at their September 6th meeting recommended approval unanimously. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and we also have transportation staff in the audience if there's any specific traffic questions you might have.
You made a comment that the transportation improvements have to be made prior to them starting the project?
Prior to them receiving a certificate of occupancy to allow anyone to live there.
That would include their improvements plus the DOT's improvements?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Waddell?
What is the specific provision in the code with regards to density bonus for some workforce housing? Is there some specific provision in the code if there's a percentage? I know there's a lot of conversation about that.
For the commercial districts, which is this O&I district, would be a commercial district. In the mixed use option for O&I, there's a 17 units per acre allowed by right with the density bonus of 10% of the units for a period of 15 years. That density limit or that cap is removed.
So the 17 per
acre,
that cap is removed if you get the 10%, and then that's codified in our code.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Joyner?
Taking a look at the supporting documents that were provided on page 21 of the entire supporting documents that were provided, but page 15 specifically of the, looks like staff and committee analysis for, I've lost my place, excuse me, for the analysis for diversity of housing options 3.1.4, there was mixed support and non-support can you explain to me what the non-support was specifically? And I'll just read it for those listening. Zoning policies should provide opportunity and incentives for developers to build a variety of housing types from single-family to multifamily, including accessory dwelling units at a range of price points.
Can you, what page was that? PH 2-1?
It's page 21 of the entire document electronically, and then page 15 of the analysis.
And you're referencing 3.2.6. Is that correct?
3.1.4.
1.4.
The affordability piece had strong support. I'm asking about the piece directly
right.
above that had modest support and modest non-support.
I think it was mixed because there's only one housing type here.
Thank you.
Mr. Rivenbark?
The total number of buildings is 3,
Yes, sir.
and that houses the apartments as well as the commercial.
Yes, sir.
What is the percent of lot coverage for the entire 5+ acres? You know that?
The building lot coverage, I'd have to refer to the site plan. I don't have that information in front of me. Roughly, looking at the screen, it looks maybe 20%.
Okay. Is that what we generally shoot for, or in that vicinity?
I don't know that there's a specific amount, as long as, you know, we're looking for an active project. We're looking for, since this is a watershed resource protection area, those impervious, like all the parking lot would need to be pervious. So if it was building, obviously that couldn't be a pervious material. So, so you got to balance those things.
So we are using impervious.
Yeah, I believe the entire parking lot would be
Entire parking
impervious
lot, I read
materials.
that. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I've got some more I'll ask later.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chambers. This time I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, council members. My name is Sam Frank. I represent the applicant. Here with me this evening are Marlena Edwards, a representative of the applicant, Mr. John Davenport, and Ms. Erin Govea, both with Davenport Engineering, our traffic engineers, and my law partner, Dana Lingenfelser. Before I delve into my presentation, if I may, I'd like to respond to Mr. Joyner's question and also to Mr. Rivenbark's question. Mr. Joyner, we perceive this as the final phase of a total development. And so for our part, we believe we are delivering a diversity of housing options in that the existing phase 1 of Summerwalk includes single-family homes and townhomes. And the proposed changes to the final phase will incorporate multifamily homes. I understand completely that staff had to evaluate solely the 5.5 acres that are the final piece of this when they delivered their policy conclusions, and therefore had to conclude that there was only one type of housing represented in this proposal. Encourage you to consider the total site as we do. Mr. Rivenbark, I don't have the breakout for the building coverage, but in terms of built upon area, the built upon area for the final phase on its own is just under 50%. And the built upon area for the total development with this change is just under 30%. All right. Total Summerwalk development includes about 25 acres. We're talking about the final phase of it today, which is shown in red on the screen. It's about 5.8 acres. We propose to rezone that property from the current entitled zoning, which was established over 10 years ago. Current established zoning allows for commercial, primarily office space, over 62,000 feet of office space with surface parking. The proposed change is to incorporate true mixed use, multifamily residential, some office with much smaller office spaces, retail and restaurant space, and significant structured parking beneath the buildings. This proposed rezoning is directly in line with the growth strategies plan and the comprehensive plan. Staff recommends approval of it. That's one of the most predominantly blue circles I've seen on one of these in a while. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of it for good reason. It fits very well into the stated policy documents that have been adopted by the city. As I mentioned, what we envision for the next step, for the final step of Summerwalk, is true mixed use, multifamily up top, some office space, and then a meaningful residential and restaurant component. Of the multifamily, the developer has made the commitment to include 20 units on a workforce basis. So the original proposal, I'll talk about this more in a minute, the original proposal included more units than we currently have. When we reduced the total number of units for the development, we kept the number of units included in the workforce commitment at 20. So what you see is slightly over the 10% threshold that's contemplated by the code. Why change? Land use priorities are and should be dynamic. As times change, the needs of the community change. The reality is today, we don't need large office spaces. Following the pandemic, remote work environments appear to be here to stay. Our perspective on desirable office space has shifted to smaller and more nimble spaces. Due to the changes of the community, the highest and best use of this site is no longer strictly commercial. This reality is not unique to Wilmington. Cities throughout the country are working to find ways to incorporate more housing within more urban environments and to reduce the excess of office space. What we do need in the city is more homes, and a lot of them. This is a sheet from the study commissioned by the county. It was originally done in 2020 and then revitalized or reviewed again in 2022. The punchline is one that you are all familiar with. We are short on houses. We are specifically short on houses that are smaller, organically more affordable houses that are located in central areas throughout the city. This proposed mixed-use project will include 178 multifamily residential units, 8,000 gross square feet of office space, 6,500 square feet of retail, and a similar amount of space for restaurant. As you can see from this image, great effort has been taken to integrate this phase of the community into the existing phase of the community. Summerwalk has always been contemplated as one cohesive development with shared common areas and open space. All of the thoroughfare roads are part of the master common areas, will be utilized by the entire community. That reality has been disrupted by time. So the first phase of the community was developed over 10 years ago, or at least started over 10 years ago. And there's been a meaningful pause while we went through the pandemic and while the developer reevaluated appropriate use for this property. The total development after approval of what we propose tonight will result in just under 300 homes. The diversity of homes will include, again, single-family homes, townhomes, and multifamily homes, with some of those multifamily homes being restricted for workforce development. The total overall for the entire community, the total density results at somewhere around 11 2/3 units per acre, residential units per acre. This site plan that we are proud to put in front of you today is the result of significant evolution. We have revised it 3 or 4 times in terms of submittals to staff. We've also revised it multiple times in response to comments that we've heard from our neighbors and from the community. That constructive feedback, both from staff and from our neighbors, results in a better project, and we're proud to present that to you today. The original application had a completely different zoning district. We were pointed towards RB, and we were looking at 5-story buildings. The original residential count was at 196 units. That's subsequently been reduced down to 178. All of the buildings are 4 stories or less now. One of the things we heard from our neighbors, specifically our neighbors in the Phase 1 Summerwalk development, is that they wanted to see a greater level of commitment from the developer with regard to the open space. And so we've incorporated that now as a zoning condition here, that specific improvements will be made to that open space, consistent with the developer's plans, but absent from any prior zoning commitment. We're now going to incorporate that. There's also some concern we heard from the neighbors about overflow parking, a need for the residents who live in Phase 1 to utilize some of the parking in the second phase. And so we've made a commitment to keep at least 20 of those spaces in the second phase available. Also heard, understandably, a concern about construction traffic. This is one of the realities of a long delay between phases of development, that those that live there are concerned about what construction will look like in the future, and so we made a commitment to direct all construction traffic to enter and leave off of Oleander Drive. Commercial uses are generally the same. By right on the left of the screen, proposed on the right side of the screen. Even though the list is a lot longer on the left, you have some overlap in use. The most significant thing that's included today by right that is omitted from the uses that we propose for commercial uses is a microbrewery. No question that this is compatible with the surrounding uses. As you can see, this is a pink triangle in a cluster of blue. Blue is what we propose, the O&I. The zoning here not only coincides with the zoning for the property to the north, to the west, and to the east, but it also serves as an effective transition to the zoning for the property to the south, which is the MD10. There are multiple up and coming and established multifamily residential developments along Oleander. This proposal is consistent in terms of density and intensity of use with others that have been recently proposed and developed. We cite the Hawthorne and the Range for examples of that reality. The purpose of this elevation is to give you an idea of what it'll look like coming out Richard Bradley and from Greenville Loop Road, but also to demonstrate the intentional transition of building massing from the existing townhomes that are 3 stories tall on the left and the new multifamily building on the right there, which has structured parking on the bottom and 3 stories of homes above. Mr. Chambers did a very effective job of explaining why this is consistent with a comprehensive plan, and I don't want to belabor those points. I do want to highlight a couple of the points, which is creating a place for everyone, getting around, which means creating opportunities to live and work in nearby locations, changing places and revitalizing spaces. Again, we are responding to the needs of the community and the needs of the market, which tell us that we need office space less and we need mixed use more, and unique places and captivating spaces, as we hope we've demonstrated by the conceptual renderings here. Creating a true sense of place has been a priority for the developer. So growth strategies map not only identifies this as an area where it makes sense from a future land use to incorporate mixed use, but also specifically identifies this as an area of a higher intensity area of opportunity and an opportunity for a mixed use center. With that, I would like to talk a little bit about traffic. This intersection at Greenville Loop and Oleander is burdened. It has been for some time. The burden on that intersection has relatively little to do with this proposed development. In more detail, I'd like to invite Mr. John Davenport to speak with you as a traffic engineer and an expert on the topic.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is John Davenport with John Davenport Engineering. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about our assessment of this project. And, you know, I've worked on a lot of projects in the area, and we've worked on this one since 2009, actually. And what you have before you on the table before you was a comparison of the 2014, someone mentioned the rezoning, the trips that were generated at that time. That's on the right, and then on the left is the proposed trip generation that is before you today. So I'm an executive summary kind of person. Although I'm an engineer, I kind of like to get right to the point. And the point is actually fairly good news. So the existing zoning allows for 38 2,835 daily trips. That's what is currently by right allowed on that site based on the zoning that was approved in 2014. The actual zoning that is before you would reduce the traffic budget, if you will, to 2,869 trips. So essentially what you would do by approving this project is reduce the traffic impact of this site by approximately 1,000 trips a day, which is a 25% reduction. So I could end my presentation here because usually we are adding traffic, but in this case, this rezoning is reducing the traffic that's improved. But we will go to the next slide just to talk a little bit about the DOT improvements. So actually, that's good. We just covered that. So there are improvements that have been built.
I don't think, unfortunately, the slide made the...
It did make it,
the
okay.
deck that's up here. I'm sorry about that.
Let me just speak to that just briefly. So you saw that staff had presented that NCDOT and the MPO have a project at the intersection that currently is funded with right-of-way in 2027 and construction in 2029. And those improvements, and I'm sure you all are familiar with how those projects are put together, include and consider the traffic that was actually projected for this site actually in 2014 and not now, obviously. So what will be built would actually more than compensate for what we propose. And actually you heard earlier that we would not be able to have a CO until these improvements are in place. So those are two very important things for consideration as it relates to traffic. One, that this rezoning would reduce traffic, but it's currently already approved for this site by 25%. And then two, that there are improvements in place or that would be in place proposed by NCDOT and funded, by the way, they're in the State Transportation Improvement Program to accommodate not only this traffic but other traffic that is proposed at this intersection. I do have a couple of slides highlighting the improvements that have been put in place from phase one. I won't get into all of those details. If you drove through the area, you've seen those, the double right turn lanes, signal modifications, this slide here, left turn lanes into this phase one entrance. So there's lots of things that have been put out here already, so it's not like there haven't been improvements made for the first phase. But again, there are improvements slated for the intersection that would relieve the impact that's going on out there today. So I'll be available for any questions after the presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. We talk a little bit about the proposed conditions. These, like the site plan, are significantly well refined. So the first I've made mention of already, developers made a commitment to include 20 multifamily units on a workforce basis for at least 15 years. This is a particularly good location for that offer of housing. The purpose of the image on the screen now is to demonstrate the proximity to the school, which is in blue, the fire station, which is a yellow triangle, and medical offices, which are reflected in red circles. Now, while our workforce is certainly comprised of more than nurses and firefighters and teachers, those are some of the core occupations that we think of when we talk about making sure that we take good care of our workforce. And as you can see, everything on that map is less than a mile from this location. Some additional conditions worth noting. Maximum number of dwelling units is limited. Maximum number of square footage of commercial is limited as well. The specific commercial uses that are permitted are tailored down in this conditional zoning. It's not everything permitted in O&I, but those specific uses that are reflected there. And as I mentioned earlier, we've made a commitment to incorporate and complete improvements on the open space park area that serves the entire Summerwalk community, and to complete these prior to the CO on the first unit in phase two. These are improvements that some of which were contemplated by the developer 12 years ago, some of which have evolved over time, some of which come as the direct response to things that people in the neighborhood told us they'd like to see. So you can see we've got incorporated a walking trail, some shelters, a dog park, and some picnic tables all around, of course, the ponds, which are the central feature to it. That land today, the reason we're talking about this and the reason that's incorporated as a zoning condition is because that land today is not yet complete. This is a development that's still in process, still being built, and part of what's being done is in the future, this park area will be further improved. A few more conditions I'd like to highlight. As Mr. Chambers mentioned, we've made a commitment to work with WAVE to improve the bus stop. This developer is particularly focused on doing what he can with regard to preserving trees and also making good and educated decisions about the new trees that are developed on site. There's a condition here that requires any tree that can be spaded, basically a tree that's 10-inch caliper or below, to be relocated on the site. Those are primarily maple trees that'll enjoy the benefit of that condition. Excuse me, magnolia trees, pardon me. More of an engineer and a lawyer than I am an arborist. At least 20 of the parking spaces in Phase 2 available for use by the owners in Phase 1. Construction traffic we talked about. And then significantly, as Mr. Davenport alluded to and Mr. Chambers mentioned, and as Mayor Saffo asked about, no unit in Phase 2, no residential unit in Phase 2, no commercial unit in Phase 2 can get a certificate of occupancy until the traffic improvements at Greenville Loop and Oleander and Greenville Ave are complete. Great. So as concluded by staff, as concluded by the Planning Commission, and as previously discussed, this development is absolutely consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the growth strategies map. It's an adaptation of land use that is well suited to the changing needs of our community in the 10 years since it was last approved. This development will provide much needed and organically more affordable housing options in an excellent location for those housing options. Accordingly, we respectfully request that this council approve this proposed rezoning. And to the extent that you have questions for me or the other experts here with me, we'd welcome the opportunity to answer them. Of course, if you have questions after you hear from others in the public hearing period, we're interested to answer those as well.
Ms. Andrews.
So it looks like the majority of these are going to be one-bedroom units, and that's where you're getting this organically more affordable, I think, part of it, right?
Well, first, yes, many one-bedroom units. Second, organically more affordable. The apartments, the multifamily, is inherently more affordable, less expensive than townhomes or patio homes that are adjacent to it. So before you incorporate the rent control with the workforce, these are homes that just cost less to live in month to month than other types of homes. Yes, certainly we believe that there's a high demand for one-bedroom homes, and that's why we've incorporated so many.
So the question that I actually had is how many of the workforce housing units are going to be one-bedroom versus two-bedroom?
That's a good question. I don't know that we specified. Certainly open-minded to evaluating, tailoring that condition if you think appropriate. We have absolutely committed to intersperse the workforce units throughout the development, and that's contemplated in the code. That's not just our commitment, but what's required by the code. It makes good sense. The intent is that they all look the same. But in terms of how many of them are one-bedroom and how many of them are two-bedroom, I'm open-minded if you have suggestions you'd like us to consider.
Yeah, I just imagine that it's difficult for a single parent to shoehorn themselves into a one-bedroom apartment. So for a small family, it would be difficult to get into, for a one-bedroom apartment to meet their needs. That's all I was thinking of.
And the metric that you rely on, the percentage of average median income for the Wilmington market, looks at that based on the number of bedrooms in the unit. And so both the qualification to qualify for workforce housing and also the rental rate depend on the number of bedrooms. If, as it is structured now, and as we would choose for it to be, we would be able to respond to the market. We would be able to respond to the people who qualify for that workforce housing who come to the door and pursue living in this location and their interest in having a one-bedroom or a two-bedroom, rather than trying to tailor that in with a specific ratio today.
Thank you.
Joyner.
I've received significant emails about this project which reference stormwater and
Okay.
drainage in the area. I did not see that addressed in your presentation. I wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, today, the land in this final phase of Summerwalk is undeveloped. So there is no stormwater treatment on site today. There, of course, is stormwater treatment on site and active in the initial phase of Summerwalk. After development of the second phase of Summerwalk, the stormwater management system will be designed and built, installed, inspected, and verified to treat the stormwater that leaves the site. So in short, the water that leaves the site today leaves it as fast as it wants to with as much sediment as it wants to because it's undeveloped land. After development, as we are required to do by law, there will be substantially less water leaving the site at a high velocity, and there will be substantially less sediment in that water that leaves the site. It's an interesting nuance that, and forgive me, I'm going to flip through a couple extra slides here to get to what I want to show you. The pond that's located in the park area, the open space area, is primarily not a stormwater management facility necessary by permit to treat water that comes off of phase one. The developer overbuilt those ponds for a couple of reasons. One, he envisioned them as a future amenity for this site. And two, there's a meaningful drainage need from the property that surrounds the site is located to the west and the south of it, which is shown in hatch here. All of the land that you see shown hatched there, most of which is outside of this development, drains to that pond, where it has an opportunity for the sediment to settle to the bottom prior to it ultimately making its way down to Bradley Creek. If you have specific concerns that folks raised with you regarding how we will manage stormwater in the future, I'd be pleased to address those if I haven't already.
I mean, it seems like you have some presentation prepared on this already. You had other slides that you just brought up.
This is about treating water that's on other sites. I don't have any other slides specifically about how our stormwater will work on site. Some of that conceptually is understood. We don't do the heavy engineering until long after entitlement, but we do know some of the details. All of the surface parking that remains on phase two will be pervious pavement, and much of the stormwater treatment facilities incorporated in this design will be subsurface infiltration systems as opposed to open ponds. Those details are understood today at a conceptual level. Is that responsive to the concerns that you heard from others?
I'm interested to hear what is brought up in the public hearing or from the folks who might speak to this.
Me too, and I hope I'll have an opportunity to respond to it after we hear that. Thank you.
Mr. Ravenberg.
In short, post-runoff cannot exceed pre-construction runoff. It has to be captured.
That's correct. Quite the contrary, yeah.
And the pervious parking lots lend greatly to that.
Absolutely.
Instead of creating runoff, it handles downpours, water, what have you.
Yes, sir.
So the existing ponds are, as you said, they're not permitted as stormwater ponds, but they're ponds and they do collect runoff.
Yes, sir. And in addition to the ponds in the park area, the open space area, there are designed and permitted stormwater facilities in phase one. But the only facility that is on phase two that serves as a pond to collect water will be replaced by in-ground infiltration engineered systems.
Underground?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to back up to address what Ms. Andrews had brought up with regard to the units that were going to be for workforce housing.
Yes, sir.
That's more clearly defined as people who are at 80% of the area median income.
That is the way it's defined in the code. Yes, sir.
I was a little cloudy on how you designate those. Do you have like 15, and then when they're done, or people qualify and they're committed to those, it's over. But the question that I have is, would there be possibility of someone out of that 15 or maybe 2 or 3 or 4 needed 2-bedroom? Are you, and I don't think you were clear on your answer. You said it was a good question, but could you designate so you'd know going into it that you're going to have some 2-bedroom, some 1-bedroom?
So I believe the point is that we don't designate specific units as the workforce units.
Exactly.
But rather that 20 of the renters, of the 178 renters, enjoy the benefit of controlled rent because they qualify for workforce housing. So which units, whether they're 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom units, are consumed by the workforce segment of the market will really be driven by the market, who shows up first, and who shows up when one of those folks moves out next.
I hear all that, Mr. Frank. I just wanted to be clear in my own mind that there will be some that are 2-bedroom.
Yes.
Okay.
Seems likely, yeah, absolutely.
I'd hate to end up with all 1-bedroom. I mean, I don't think that that would be something that would go against the grain, but I agree with what Ms. Andrews said. There are going to be some people come along that need that and may have, a child or what have you, and would need the 2-bedroom, which would be required. So anyway, I'm glad you clarified that.
Understood, absolutely.
And I also understand that whatever happens here tonight, the TRC is another whole layer of approval and the things that will come later that may not be included in this.
Absolutely,
conditions.
that's correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Spears.
So I'm just going to piggyback off of what was said previously, and I'll start with what Councilman Joyner said. And maybe I was confused, but when you showed the pond, I thought I heard you say that that was going to remedy stormwater issues that were already there, right? Did I hear you say that, or was I tripping? I trip sometimes.
Make sure that I'm on the same page. Is this the slide you're referring to?
No, where you, not that one, the pond.
Yeah.
All laid out, nice.
Yep.
With the doggy thing and all that other stuff. Yeah, that one. That's
Yes,
the
sir.
nice one. Yeah. So you said that was going to remedy the stormwater issues in the area in its entirety, right?
Well, today, the stormwater in Summerwalk Phase 1 is treated effectively by permitted stormwater systems in Summerwalk Phase 1. Much of the pond that you see on the screen right now isn't necessary to achieve that goal. That pond is overbuilt, it's oversized. Are you asking me about how we will handle stormwater on the next phase, or how we're handling?
I'm asking you if, I was confused, because I thought you said this was like, this pond is not in existence right now, right?
It is. The pond is in existence, but it's not improved with all of the features that you see on the screen here yet.
Okay, so when it gets all of these improvements, it's going to remedy all of the stormwater issues, not only where Summerwalk Phase 2 is going to be, but just in that area, right? Because that's what I thought I heard.
Yeah, I'm not aware of.
Did anybody else think they heard that? I thought I heard that.
I'm not aware of there being any problems with stormwater management today.
So did you not say that it would help with stormwater in the area?
Yes, absolutely. Not only does that pond collect water from this site, but it also collects water as a byproduct of its extra size. It collects water from all of those other sites that are around us. Now, it's not permitted to treat stormwater, but it does in fact serve as a drainage recipient for
Because it's a pond.
Yeah, because
And water's going to go.
Exactly, yeah, yes, sir, you understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. And now I'll go to the next thing. Thank you, David, because I was tripping a little bit, but not really. The AMI for the workforce housing units. So I have a two-part question there. So you said that the AMI for the workforce housing units will be 80%?
Based on what's in the code today, the definition of workforce housing in the Wilmington Code today, we've committed to having 20 units available for people who qualify for workforce housing.
So how open is the developer to 20 units for 20 years or 25 units for 15 years?
Increasing the number of units or the time period?
Either one.
He's not with me tonight, and I wasn't prepared, didn't ask him that question in advance, so I don't think that I can make any commitment with regard to the extension of time or the increase in the number of units. I'll note that we're already over the 10% that the code contemplates as a policy.
You're over the 10%. You said if the 10% of 176, 178?
Yeah, we're over by a couple. Instead of 18, it's 20. Yes, sir.
So instead of 17.8, you're going with 20, so 1.2 units?
Two, yes,
Two-
sir.
two
Yes,
units.
sir. It wouldn't,
All right.
it would be fractional. It would be
2
18
units.
versus 20. Yes, sir.
2 units.
Yeah.
So, I mean, come on, you said it yourself in your presentation, we need more housing.
We do.
So give us more years or give us more units.
I'm not in a position to make a commitment on that. During the balance of the public hearing, I'll try to communicate with my client about that request.
Okay, get back to me. I'll
will.
be here all night.
Now, someone suggested to me prior to the hearing that there may be an appetite or an interest from the city to see us make some portion of those 20 workforce units available to people with 60% AMI or less, as opposed to 80%. And that is a topic I'm prepared to discuss if that's something you would like.
I mean, you would only be growing on me if you went down to 60% AMI.
I'm sorry, sir, what's that?
You would only be growing on me if you went down to 60% AMI.
So, Madam Attorney, the way workforce housing is defined in the code is very specific. It says 80% AMI for 15 years or more. If we agree to commit that half of those units, that 10 of those units, will be available to people who make 60% AMI or less, are we still within the definition of workforce housing under the code?
Yes, sir. For the purpose of that, anything 80% or below would count. So
Got
it's
it.
not just at 80. It'd be 80% or anything below that.
In that case, Councilman Spears, that is something we would be willing to add to the condition that's been proposed, that half of those units would be available to workforce at 60% AMI or lower.
So we can add that in as a definite, that you're willing to do that.
Yes, sir. That of the 20 that we've offered, 10 of them
10 for 60.
will be at 60 and 10 will be at 80. Yes, sir.
Man, you must have been reading up on me.
Well, it's a good policy. We care about it and want to participate. It should be evident by the way we propose this plan. Thank you, sir.
You just convinced me, I'm telling you.
Okay. Councilmember Waddell.
Mr. Frank, could you go to the slide? It was one of the last ones you did in the initial presentation with the 10-inch caliper trees condition.
I went too far. Bear with me. Yes, there we are.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of this, so I guess I'm certainly no arborist either, so it's a little bit novel to me. But basically, my understanding is that that the developer would be reclaiming the existing large trees that are on site and retaining them on the property.
Yes, sir, that's right. You can get away with that up to a certain size, which is why that 10-inch caliper limit. But the spade is 6 to 8 feet in diameter. It's an impressive machine and allows relocation and saving while relocating existing trees.
Okay, yeah, I just haven't seen a lot of that, but it's interesting, and I think certainly a positive. And then also it's my understanding that no occupancy would be allowed, even if the units were substantially completed, no occupancy would be allowed, whether in the commercial or the residential portion of Phase 2 until this DOT project has been completed?
That's correct.
And that's scheduled for construction 2029 currently?
That's correct. Now, the condition allows for the possibility that the developer might participate in some of that.
Sure.
And maybe we can persuade the DOT to accelerate by participating. That's yet to be determined. But the last clause that you see on the screen there, receive final zoning approval, our understanding is we have to have final zoning approval to receive a CO for any type of use of any type of space.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I may have some other questions, but that's it for now.
Mr. Barnett?
Yeah, just my, I just want to add my voice to the fact that the 20 workforce housing homes, that all of them are not just one single-family home. I mean, one bedroom. You know, I just want to make sure that, you know, we're clear on that there will be more than just one bedroom. It won't be 21 bedroom workforce houses. It'll be a number of one bedrooms and a number of at least 2 bedrooms. I just want to make sure, I think that's really important, especially if we're trying to get people back on their feet.
Understood.
That's all. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Can I go back just real quick? And I'm just jogging my memory here. When the pond, or I guess I call it the lake, what is it, about 3 acres?
You said the size? It's a little bit.
How big is that area? I've always heard it was about 3 acres in size.
No, it's about 10 acres, I believe.
10 acres?
Yes, sir.
Where the pond is, or this area here?
Yes, sir.
It's about 10 acres. And I guess I'm going back all the way back to 2014.
Yeah.
When this thing was discussed, and I remember the neighbors from Giles, I believe it was Giles Road.
Okay.
That they were having stormwater issues and what have you, flooding issues. And I guess the pond was there to help the folks outside of the actual physical development. Is that the case?
Yes, sir. And I want to be real clear.
Because I remember there was a lot of flooding in that particular area. I remember we were having flooding up there at Seagate at the fire station. We had to put a significant stormwater system in there. The city did many years ago. Every time it rained heavy there, that fire station would flood out. And I do remember there was other issues outside of where the fire station was located, and part of it took in consideration that Giles Avenue. And I remember that some of the neighbors were coming forward that were concerned about it. And the pond thing was going to be built in such a way that it would help alleviate some of the flooding from the adjacent properties that were already having flooding issues.
Yes, sir. It provides drainage relief to some extent for all the property that's shown in crosshatch here, which includes the sites that you're referring to.
Okay. So that thing is 10 acres in size?
It's more than that. I think it's 11 and a half, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Yes,
Any
sir.
other questions? Okay. Stay tuned, sir.
Thank you.
This time, I'm going to open up the public hearing and ask if anybody in the public wishes to speak on this particular item. If you please state your name for the record and where you live. This public hearing will be set at 30 minutes. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to talk. So the public hearing is now open. Okay. So, we got some.
Hello, my name is Richard Sabatini. I live at 4040 Tamarisk Lane in the Summerwalk development, Phase 1. There's no denying that the developer has a right to build on this property. Our concern is the height of the buildings and the density. They keep referring to the master plan or the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan also says building in character with the neighborhood. And 4-story buildings are not in character with that neighborhood. They will just, you'll be driving down Oleander and boom, 4-story buildings. We have, as Mr. Frank said, there's been a lot of back and forth between the developer and us. The people who live in the community would be much happier with 3-story buildings, which is in line with the current Summerwalk development. Our other concerns, as you've said, are stormwater problems, which I'm not a stormwater expert, and I'm not even going to go there. The other major concern is the traffic. To exit the Summerwalk development as it is, if you want to make a left onto Greenville Loop Road, you need to leave a good 10 minutes before there's a break in traffic where you can actually make a left-hand turn out of Summerwalk onto Greenville Loop Road. With an additional 178 units, I don't know how that's going to be possible. Now, I know that there will be an exit out of phase 1, out of phase 2, to make a right onto Oleander. There is no way to go left onto Oleander unless you go out to Greenville Loop Road. And with the additional traffic, it's going to be next to impossible. I think that we're too close to that intersection in order to add another light there. So I don't know how the traffic is going to be sustainable for anyone. And that's all I want to say. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else?
My name is Kirk Howard. I live on 1019 Woodley Run of Greenville Loop. I just want to mention that I'm one of the people that travels on Greenville Loop regularly. And like a lot of other people, I'm from time to time surprised at how much traffic's backed up Greenville Loop. And it seems to get longer time and time again. I don't know if you know the route of Greenville Loop, but it literally is backing up now from time to time up until Greenville Loop Seafood, which is about halfway. And I can't imagine what another 300 to 500 car trips are going to do to that. That's my only comment.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Any other questions from council?
Yeah, I'd like Mr. Frank to address those two issues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate the opportunity to do so. We think this is absolutely consistent with the character of the neighborhood. Now, I recognize when I say that, I'm talking about the neighborhood today and the neighborhood in the near future. But incorporation of 4-story buildings adjacent to 3-story buildings that are adjacent to 2-story buildings is deliberate. We've got a transition of density and a transition of housing type for that very reason. And as we noted, both the Range and the Hawthorne development that are just a short distance down Oleander from this development include a similar type of housing product, which is 4-story multifamily residences. With regard to traffic, there's two things that I want to note. First, today, we don't have that additional right in, right out onto Oleander. And once that's installed for the benefit of the entire Summerwalk community, that's going to provide some relief. It provides a logical point for people to exit and a logical point for people to come in. Now, I get it. Some people are going to want to leave the neighborhood and turn left, but you can't ignore the benefit for those who are going to turn right. That will take some of the pressure off of Richard Bradley Drive and Greenville Loop Road. I'd also note that on Greenville Loop Road, there's only one private citizen that's done anything to make that intersection better, and that's this developer. We sunk close to $1 million in to building additional turn lanes going in and out of the community, and significantly, a second right turn lane leaving Greenville Loop Road and turning on to US 76. We've already acknowledged, of course, that that intersection is not operating well today, that there's opportunity for significant improvement, but there's only so much that we can ask of any one private citizen to do in response to those needs for the public roads. And this developer has already proven willing and able to do his part to make it better. Of course, as you know, we've also accepted the condition that we don't get to rent a single apartment or restaurant or retail space until whatever improvements the DOT and the city deem necessary are complete at that intersection. Those are my comments in response to the comments we heard. Of course, if you have questions for me as well, I'm interested to answer them.
Mr. Waddell?
I think it's important for the public to understand the scope of the project for the Greenville Loop traffic improvements that have been funded and let for construction. And I don't know if there's anybody from the MPO here that can speak to the scope of that project, or maybe the traffic engineer that we heard from earlier can kind of elaborate a bit on the scope of that project that's to take place.
So the image that's on the screen does show those improvements, but I concede it is very difficult to follow. And so if there's someone from the city here who you'd like to invite up, certainly defer to them. If not, Mr. Davenport understands those improvements well and can speak to them.
I'm getting that we don't have anyone from the MPO here, but if Mr. Davenport just wants to come up, just a general overview, right?
Yeah, bring Mr.
Thank you. So yes, it is fairly difficult to see all of the improvements. I think the summary of what is occurring here, when you get to an intersection, a lot of times why you have congestion is because of a lack of through lanes or turn lanes. In this case, you can see that there's currently, there are going to be 2 left turn lanes coming off of Oleander onto Greenville Loop. We still have our dual right turn lanes that are proposed. So that means Greenville Loop is going to be improved to receive that traffic. That is a significant improvement. I'm trying to see, based on this scale, everything else that's there. I mean, you're seeing storage being lengthened. So what happens when you have an intersection when there's not enough storage, that traffic backs into the through lane, so then people can't get to or vice versa, they can't get to the turn lane because traffic blocks the through lane. So we'll have storage improved here as well. And I'm doing the best I can to describe a graphic that we have here. We've got some information here. Yes, I touched on the second left turn lane, signal modification, second receiving lane, and a right turn lane into the site. So I think I've covered just about everything that's in this improvement plan. Thank you. Whoever zoomed that in, that's great for those of us that have aging eyes. So I'll be happy to answer anything else as it relates to this. I do want to also make sure that I highlight.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, sir.
You're talking like you at a convention with other people like you. We don't understand what you're saying. You got to tell us what's happening right here.
Well, sir, I'm not the DOT. I'm trying to explain it just like you guys are here. And, you're looking at an aerial photography with some graphics that have been provided. The short answer is that the improvements that are here, shown on this plan, include the improvements that are required by this development, right? And they mitigate the impact of this development. And in fact, this project cannot be built until what you see on the screen is built.
So let me ask, how? What takes the trips? The gentleman said that traffic on Greenville Loop is being backed up halfway, and that's true. So
yes.
what's going on? how are these improvements going to alleviate that?
Well, when you add turn lanes, you make it easier for traffic to get through the intersection, sir.
But the improvements are just on, okay.
No, there's improvements on Oleander, there's improvements on Greenville, and there's improvements on, on all 4 legs, you'll have improvements.
Okay.
And if again, you're asking me to get into some technical traffic engineering weeds, which I don't think you'll appreciate. What I'm trying to say to you is that this project is obviously not my project. It's the city's project. It's the state's project. And I will give you a little bit of background. When projects like this are funded, they have to be scored. So someone had to take all the traffic, all the accidents, all that data, and they had to go to the DOT. And they had to say, this project, how does it rank with all the projects in the state? Everybody's putting projects in. Where does this rank? And they look at it, okay, it ranks. We're going to fund it. And so they set aside money to fund it. So these are all these eyes they're looking at it in Raleigh, here in the MPO.
We understand that part.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you understand this has been vetted by lots of people, so I can't take all the weight or the credit for this project. And you're asking me to try to explain it. So I'm just trying to do the best I can to tell you that there have been a lot of people that have looked at this. And at the end of the day, this will improve the operation of the traffic. It will shorten the queues. And as my friend said here, we'll have a right-in, right-out. Also, so if you want to leave the site, you can proceed up to Oleander and make a right turn. And you can't do that today.
And what we propose today is fewer trips per day.
Yeah, that was the other point I was going to make, but I wanted to clarify that. This is 1,000 trips less than currently approved zoning. 1,000.
Yeah, I heard you when you said that the first time, but you know.
I just want to make sure everybody hears it.
Yeah, we heard.
1,000 trips less.
We heard the 25%.
Most of the time we come in and say it's going to be 1,000 trips more. Please let us build it. I'm saying it's 1,000 trips less.
We heard you.
Thank you.
So Mr. Waddell, you had a follow-up question.
Just one quick follow-up, and it should be pretty easy. I just want to make sure the vernacular I'm understanding, but he referenced, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your name at the moment, but he referenced stacking, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding. That's the queuing that we hear about oftentimes, that when vehicles are stacking up, waiting, that a lot of these are going to alleviate that issue that we see, and I think the vernacular I typically hear is queuing, right?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
That's what you were saying.
Yes, sir, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's exactly what the auxiliary lanes do. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So let me just reiterate. All the traffic improvements that we're looking at on the screen right here are traffic improvements that the state of North Carolina is due to make. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, this is their plan.
Okay, and obviously these have been scored. Mr. Waddell, you had indicated that this project or these projects have been funded?
It's funded, fully funded, and let for construction 2029.
Okay, and your comment, Mr. Frank, is that this project does not get started or does not get CO'd until all those improvements by the state of North Carolina are complete, which helps to alleviate the traffic, I believe, on Greenville Loop, which was promised to us many years ago. And, we're getting to it now. I know that it has been funded, but so I just want to reiterate what you shared with us, that this project would not be CO'd until those improvements are made by the state of North Carolina.
That is correct, with the caveat that the developer might participate and help. It might not necessarily be
Sure,
the
I understand
state
that. So if he wants to accelerate the project, put money into the deal, whatever the case is, and work out something with the DOT, that's his issue. But what we're saying here is, based on this condition, this project does not get really built until those improvements are put into the ground.
It can be built, no one can move in. Nobody can start adding trips to the intersection from this phase.
Well, I couldn't imagine you folks building something and not being able to get a return on investment. I think that would be crazy, but anyway, that's your business.
That's a risk above my pay grade, yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Ambar.
And the other improvements that don't show up here, like I've seen them before, is our cross-city trail that's coming down Greenville Loop Road, and the city is involved, I'd say heavily, with DOT and coordinating with them on improving pedestrian safety
Yes.
when traversing that intersection all the way up to where you see it in on Greenville Avenue. So
Yes.
that's something, that's not waiting until 27 or 29. That's, we're going to be, we're finishing up right-of-way acquisition and design, what have you, so our Greenville Loop Trail is happening.
And I can't speak to your schedule there, but I can say that you'll see in the language of that condition, we allowed for agreement between the DOT, the MPO, and the city engineering department for that very reason, recognizing that there's some integration here between the multi-use path and the traffic improvements that needs to be taken into
I
account.
know Mr. Penton's been involved in that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from council?
Sorry, I do have a question. Did we clarify whether we were going to add the 60% AMI? We need to get a final decision on that before we vote.
Yes. Whoever makes the motion must include it into that motion that Mr. Frank.
I'm not sure whether you need me to say it explicitly. We will agree to that and are glad to from the applicant's perspective.
And Mr. Mayor, whoever reads the statement and moves the motion, it's going to be a modification to condition number 16
Number 16.
to make it 10 at 80% AMI and 10 at 60% AMI.
Okay. Okay. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Waddell. Mr. Barnett, will you please read the consistency statement and also add into that condition number 16 of the 60% AMI of 10 units? Okay, and 10 of them at 80.
All right. I move to approve the proposed amendment to assign zoning to property located at 6120 Oleander Drive from CB/CD Community Business Conditional District and O&I CD Office and Institutional Conditional District for a mixed-use development defined to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan based on the applicant material and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find the approval of the rezoning request is reasonable in the public interest for the following ways. The proposed rezoning would allow for a mixed-use development that provides additional housing options, including a workforce component, increasing residential density along with a 80% 10 houses and 10 apartments and 60% 10 houses, identified transit route, and includes a significant commercial component. That's good.
Okay. All right, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Ravenbach, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item PH2, which is an ordinance amending the Land Development Code, Chapter 18, to exempt currently existing bona fide farm uses over 10 acres from certain zoning and permitting requirements. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Caudill. Mr. Caudill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Catherine Thurston, our zoning administrator, will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members. The request before you this evening is an applicant-initiated text amendment that would exempt existing bona fide farm uses over 10 acres from certain zoning and permitting requirements. This item was considered by the Planning Commission on December 6th, 2023, and on January 10th, 2024. The Planning Commission voted 4-2 to recommend approval of the amendment with clarification that would only be applicable to farms meeting the established criteria prior to the effective date of the ordinance. The authority to regulate agricultural uses is one of the more significant differences between city and county authority. When counties were extended the authority to enact zoning in 1959, bona fide farms were exempted from such regulations. It's important to note that non-farm uses, even when located on a bona fide farm, are not exempt from county zoning. The major difference in statutory authority between counties and cities is that North Carolina general statutes allow, but they do not require, cities to regulate agricultural land uses. Generally, a bona fide farm is defined as production and activities relating to or incidental to the production of crops, fruits, vegetables, plants, dairy, livestock, poultry, aquaculture, timber, and agritourism. What constitutes agritourism is a heavily litigated body of law, but has been determined to include educational activities and entertainment events carried out on a farm for the purpose of enjoying a rural setting. The pre-2021 LDC did not specifically allow agricultural uses as a permitted use of property, other than the allowance for keeping poultry and livestock, as set forth in Chapter 6 of the City Code, and various agricultural uses that were set forth in district standards within the Land Development Code. The old code was permissive in nature, which was common when it was originally adopted. However, case law has since invalidated this method of code structure, and we have revised our code accordingly. The new code includes agricultural uses by defining them, incorporating urban farms, and specifically prohibiting concentrated feeding operations and slaughterhouses within the city. Current known farming operations in the city would be classified as urban farms and regulated by Section 18174, as well as by Chapter 6 of the City Code. The LDC does not have a specific provision that exempts the use of land for agricultural uses from zoning permits. However, there is no such exemption for the use of buildings or structures in current code. The proposed amendment would modify the LDC pertaining to bona fide farms to exempt qualifying uses from certain land use and permitting requirements. If approved, existing bona fide farm uses over 10 acres would not be required to obtain building permits, comply with floodplain development standards, obtain permits for temporary uses such as festivals, concerts, or other entertainment events, or obtain permits to remove trees that would otherwise be protected. Qualification as a bona fide farm remains generally consistent with statutory requirements for exemptions. Bona fide farms would still be subject to stormwater controls, conservation resource regulations, signage standards, and permitting requirements for uses and structures that are not associated with the farm use. In researching this amendment, staff has identified 2 large-scale farming uses within the city limits, including Canterbury Stables on Wrightsville Avenue and Oak Point Farms on Airlie Road, both of which would be impacted by the proposal. These uses predate annexation into the city limits and certainly the adoption of the new code, so to the extent any nonconformities existed upon annexation, they would be permitted to continue operations pursuant to Land Development Code Article 7, which allows nonconformities to continue provided they do not engage in activity that would increase the extent of any nonconformities or discontinue operating for more than 180 days. And I have a few images of the known farms impacted by this proposal. This is Canterbury Stables on Wrightsville Avenue, the surrounding neighborhoods. It's proximate to Bradley Creek, Gray Marsh subdivision to the east, Kensington Place to the north, and Surrey Downs to the south. Planning staff did receive several comments from the surrounding neighborhoods pertaining to this farm. Those comments generally express concerns related to events, noise, traffic, parking, and lighting. Staff has discussed with the applicant changes that might address those concerns. However, since the request is applicant initiated, we can't require such changes. Comments also include the need to protect sensitive open spaces and preserve the historic uses of property. This is an image of Canterbury Farms as it exists today. The other farm is Oak Point Farms on Airlie Road, with the neighboring subdivision to the north with Edgewater, Intercoastal Waterway to the east, Bradley Creek Point and Airlie Gardens to the southwest, and the Airlie Brook subdivision to the north. And this is looking from the Intercoastal Waterway at the property. Given the unique nature of existing farms in the city limits, staff believes that the proposed changes to the Land Development Code are generally consistent with several policies outlined in the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, including those encouraging the protection of unique environmental and natural resources and promoting such areas as economic and cultural assets. Staff believes that the proposal is reasonable and in the public interest and recommends approval of the request. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have of staff, and I know that the applicant is prepared to provide a presentation as well.
Are there any questions from the staff? For the staff. Yes, sir. Councilman Luke.
Just one, we've got a lot of questions from residents about noise, and this amendment does not change the noise ordinance that we have currently on.
No, sir, the noise ordinance would still be applicable.
Thank you.
Mr. Joyner?
And just to confirm one more time, these are the only two properties that staff has been able to identify in city limits that meet this description?
Yes, sir, and the amendment would only be applicable to bona fide farms over 10 acres that exist upon the effective date of the ordinance.
And Canterbury Stables is the applicant, or is the one who proposed this, but it would in fact apply to both properties?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
Yeah. You mentioned that there are some changes that, you said something about there are some changes that you guys suggest, but the applicant has to do them or something. Say that part again.
Staff has had several discussions with the applicant to work towards changes that could allay concerns with regard to traffic, parking, noise, events, that sort of thing. However, the applicant, they did accept staff and the Planning Commission's proposal to limit this to bona fide farms over 10 acres existing as of the effective date of the ordinance, but that was the only change that was made since the initial presentation to Planning Commission. To make the amendment only applicable to bona fide farms over 10 acres that are existing upon the effective date. It would prevent the assemblage of land or other parcels for the purposes of creating a new bona fide farm that would also be exempt from city zoning.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you.
No, Mrs. Spears, we have a question. Mrs. Spears?
So yeah, basically, and you've answered the question, I think Luke just asked it, about the sound. And this doesn't change that.
No, sir. The noise ordinance is not part of the Land Development Code. It's part of Chapter 6 of the City Code. It's enforced by the police department, and it would not be changed by this amendment.
Okay, because I mean, from what I'm reading, that's the biggest concern. No matter who has ownership of the farms, the sound, the noise ordinance is potentially problematic for the people that's around. But as long as we're articulating the fact that this has nothing to do with that, and that, you know, the noise ordinance should be enforced and will be enforced, then, you know, however we rule tonight won't affect that. And we just need people to understand that. So, I mean, it's not really a question for you. I asked the question, you answered it previously, but yeah.
Yeah, city zoning doesn't have the ability to enforce the zoning ordinance. We would defer to the police department and the city attorney for questions related to the enforcement of that ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ronbar?
Ms. Thurston, assuming this passes and they want to have events, is there any, I hate to call it side yards and setbacks, but is there any restriction that would prevent one from putting up, say, a large event tent on or about 5 feet off the property lines from some existing residential? Is that?
No, sir. As currently proposed, there would be nothing to prevent that.
So we pretty much just open the checkbook up and say, here it is. Do what you like.
Yeah, the only things that would continue to be subject to city zoning are those shown on the screen in front of you now.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Thank you. I have a brief presentation. Sorry. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. My name is Amy Schaefer. I am here tonight with Mr. Adam Sosney on behalf of the applicant, Wrightsville Farm and Equine. They are the owners of Canterbury Stables. This is the text amendment. I'm going to skip it. You have it. If we need to come back to it, I will. I just want to say that we're not here tonight for rezoning, and we're not here tonight asking to be able to be a bona fide farm. We are a bona fide farm and can continue as such, as Ms. Thurston said. What we're here for tonight is with help to clarify the current city code and what is allowed for agriculture uses in bona fide farms and what's not. There's a little bit of inconsistency in the code, which caused some concerns with things like accessory buildings, how many buildings you can have, what happens if you have to regrade for a paddock or the stables. So that's why we're here tonight, to try to get that clarification. Again, Ms. Thurston went through this, so I won't go through it. There are 2 agricultural uses that aren't allowed. This would not change that in any way, shape, or form. So the city code defines agricultural land as the state definition. So what is the state definition? And the state definition says raising of horses, poultry, and also agritourism. That is the definition in the city code. North Carolina is a right to farm state. And so what is agritourism? I think a lot of this has come down to that, as Mr. Spears and some of the other council members have said, it's been noise. That's what we've heard the majority from the neighbors. And so when we were working through this, we tried to figure out what kind of activities fall under agritourism, what kind of activities are normal parts of a farm. Is a horse show part of the farm? Is the sheriff's department coming out and training their mounted unit part of a regular farm? So that's something that we've been talking about and did not come up with a good answer. But the state actually has that for us in their definitions. Another thing I think just is interesting and wanted people to be aware of, North Carolina, Wilmington is a bee city. We actually have an organic bee farm on our site, which as far as I know is the only one in the city. And of course, it all comes down to the comprehensive plans and policies and how those fit. And Ms. Thurston went through some of those. We found a couple more that we think are important. But really where this comes into play, I think, is the Wrightsville Avenue Small Area Plan. So only about 0.2% of the acreage in the city of Wilmington is currently agricultural. And it's not, there are no agricultural uses listed or defined in the code. Respectfully, urban farm is listed under commercial uses, and it's not listed as an agricultural use, and it doesn't include livestock. So the Wrightsville Avenue Small Area Plan was adopted specifically to address this area of the town. And Canterbury Stables is listed in there specifically as a significant site for agricultural uses. It's not listed as a non-conforming use. So even in the adopted plans and policies of the city, we're listed as a significant site that should be protected and conserved. This is a picture of Canterbury Stables, what it looked like before the current owner purchased and redeveloped the property. So some of that redevelopment, he has currently planted 9 southern live oaks, and there are 6 more scheduled to be planted. The one that you see is actually one of the 30-foot tall, and I had just heard another one was planted today. They have completely renovated the stables. They've repaired the on-site wells. They replaced over 1 mile of fencing, and here's a big one. Do you see those little things that look like bushes behind that building? That's horse manure. It had been stored there at the mouth of Bradley Creek for we don't know how long. And the one at the top you can kind of see as we started taking it away.
Hold on, we have a question here.
Sorry.
Which picture is
So the bottom picture, you can see they kind of look like bushes over that, they're mounds of horse manure.
Okay.
And the top picture is the same mounding, but where we've started to haul it away. So to date, the current property owner has removed about 326 truckloads of horse manure from adjacent to Bradley Creek. Agritourism. The state actually defines that and gives us some idea of what those are. Weddings, receptions, activities, meetings, demonstrations for farm activities, meals, and other events taking place at the farm for rural settings. Agritourism, and it's an agricultural use, as shown by the state definition which the city code adopts. It is not a commercial use. That being said, I think the important thing is, no matter what we do here today, we are not asking to modify the noise ordinance. We are still zoned residential. We would continue to be zoned residential, and this noise ordinance would apply. Now, currently, our farm equipment is exempt between the hours of 7 a.m. and midnight, but any other kind of event, be it a wedding, be it we have the Boys and Girls Club scheduled to come out this summer, and they're going to do summer field trips for horse riding. We have fall festivals, and I'm happy to have Mr. Sosny come up and talk about some of the activities that we have had on site. The UNCW Ollie is offering an adult education class at the farms. They said that it blends history, nature, and culture. We have the Canterbury Crew Club. This is a group of children affiliated with the Saddlebred Horse and Breeders Association. They come out and have activities on the site. We've got Boy Scout troops that are coming out to get their horse badges. We've got professional training opportunities. And so if you try to say what these events are and what category they fall into, it does become difficult. But if the concern is noise, we're not asking to change that at all. And so I'm happy to answer any particular questions. And as I said, Mr. Sosny is here as well if you have questions.
Yes, Mr. Wanda.
How many events, maybe over the last year or so since the ownership has changed hands, how many events has the site seen?
I'll let Mr. Sosny speak to that if I may.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. My name is Adam Sosny. I'm one of the owners. My business partner, Joe McKinney, is the other, and he's not here this evening. To answer your question, we have some form of agritourism, some sort of event, several times a week. And we've owned the properties for almost 2 years now. We kind of stumbled into it. My partner called me one day and said that he had heard that the previous property owner was interested in selling it, and then an out-of-town apartment developer was looking to purchase the property and to try to rezone it for a residential apartment complex. And I told him on the phone then, I said, you know, Joe, I've lived in Wilmington since 1990. I've been driving past that place since I moved to Wilmington, and I was in the 6th grade at Roland Grice. We're in that business, and that's not the right place for that. It would be a shame to see that get developed. I've watched it, since I was 11 years old. And so we got into it. I went and saw the owner and had the opportunity to make a commitment to her that we would purchase it, and we would contractually say that we would keep it as a farm and make an effort to keep it as a farm for a minimum of 5 years. So we have, between the Canterbury Club, between the Sheriff's Department that has used our riding arena that we built for the fallen officers 9/11 Memorial, Spring Arbor Retirement Facility uses the property to bring seniors out to interact with the animals. Pulse for People is on site on a monthly basis to help get the future service animals accustomed to being around large animals and large noises. I think Amy mentioned, we've got the Boys and Girls Club that are coming out. Boy Scouts are coming out to do their stuff. The Azalea Festival Committee has reached out about bringing back a potential horse show that used to happen at Longleaf Park. And at some point, the riding arena there was repurposed. In that 2 years, we've had one wedding. That was for my partner's daughter's mother. It was a pro bono. We're not in the wedding business. It's an operating farm. We have horses on site. We have kids on site on a daily basis doing riding lessons. We've quite frankly invested a lot of time and resources and money into fixing the property up and to make it a functioning farm again. And the last thing we want is the property ruined from, overusing it for events. If that was our case, we never would have spent the time and the effort and quite frankly, the resources, the amount of money that we spent on the property to make it a farm again, so.
Thank you, Mr. Shazzy. So roughly, a couple hundred events held on site probably, agritourism, full spectrum.
We were under construction for a good year when we purchased the property. The barn leaked. I think Amy made reference to that. It started with Michelle Hart, the previous owner, opened it January 1st, 1969. She was a well-known, she's in the Saddlebred Hall of Fame, Horse Trainers Hall of Fame. It was a well-known facility up and down the East Coast, and this is all stuff that I was not aware of, really, and I think when we got involved, we started making improvements and started kind of peeling back the onion and realizing there was so much kind of deferred maintenance that had happened over the years, starting with the hurricanes that happened in the mid and late 90s, and then ongoing, the burden, and that's what we've learned. And obviously, as a developer and a builder here in town, I've been on the other end of that for people who could no longer maintain these properties, and we came in and purchased them to build on them. And this was the one that I said that it just is not the right place for that. It is a resource to the community. We have if we can, we want to make a run at rehabbing it and bringing it back to life. You can stop by after school Monday through Friday and on Saturday and Sunday, and you will find children on the site either taking riding lessons, interacting with the animals, planting trees. One thing, we've got this beautiful live oak out front that I've gotten really passionate about. We've planted several more, but that tree is 200 plus years old, and so one thing we started to do is we brought in an outside arborist to excavate the soils and try to make sure that tree lives its full potential, hopefully another 150 or 200 years. And so, yeah, it's a labor of love. It's not a profitable venture. If we wanted it to be profitable, we would have built on the property. Just to be completely honest, by right, we could have built 30 houses out there, 34 bedroom houses for rent. We're right next door to a rental house community. So it's not like that doesn't exist in that area. It's not a desirable location. We just really don't want to see that. We see ourselves as stewards of the property, and hope to preserve it not only for folks now, but for generations to come.
Thank you.
100 plus, 200 maybe, I don't know.
Thank you.
Every day.
Mr. Rivenbark.
Adam, I've been out there. Y'all were gracious enough to have me out there. I ain't got a problem with anything that Amy has said and that you've said. Once we do this tonight, it's water over the fall.
Sure.
My point is, I appreciate what you've done there. I've been riding by there all this time too, and admire it. And what you all have done is above and beyond what I think anybody else would have done. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's great. And what I'm getting ready to tell you is not a problem. It's just a concern that I have about, you say you're not going to be in the event business. Good. If one occasionally comes along, somebody like the situation you just described, I get it. But you got neighbors, and what I'm asking you, I'm not going to ask that it be any addition to the amendment. I'm asking you from man to man, be sensitive if somebody calls and says, look, be sensitive to it. They're not going to back you up. You'll still be able to do what y'all have come here and asked for, but be sensitive to them, because they've been there longer than that stable has. Not Gray Marsh and that, but the other ones. They were built in the mid-'60s. So, and the people across the street, there's a lot of new stuff over there, but that's not, in my definition, that's not rural. It's kind of urban. When you think about it, you're just lucky enough to have 10+ acres of land stuck in the middle of that. But just be sensitive. And I know you will.
I appreciate that, and you know, it's funny you say that, because at the last Planning Commission meeting, a couple from Surrey Downs, which is our direct neighbor, came up and said, hey, you know, we're in favor of what you're doing. We love the property and we think it's great. We heard a dumpster get dropped at 6:30 in the morning, and I said, you know, in fairness, I wasn't there at 6:30 in the morning, so I don't know. Let me call and figure it out. Called over, and you know, we talked to Wall Recycling and asked them to push it. And obviously, to your point, I think their point was, well, we're at the commercial facility across the street in the Triangle Lounge, and so you're just on our route. And we said, well, I could appreciate that, but if you could push us further in your route or redo your route, that would be helpful to our immediate neighbors. But I think the folks that are immediately adjacent to us in Surrey Downs, for the most part, you know, we want to be a good neighbor. I will say that, again, I'm aware of maybe 2 events that have, you know, have been an issue. Again, we have events out there on a daily basis, and everywhere we've ever gone, we want to be a good neighbor.
Those events that have been described, that y'all described, have more of those. I mean, you can't do enough of those. They're good. They're civic-minded events and stuff like that. Sure. But if you ever do get, you know, a complaint, be sensitive to them.
I understand.
They're old like me. They got nothing better to do than think about that.
And Mr. Ravenbark, you had a question, one thing, you know, that we're asking for a blank check. I do want to point out, we would still be subject to the state stormwater regulations. We would still be subject to the conservation resource regulations. And so I asked them to pull up a plan, just so you can see. The back of the property, kind of where that, the vegetation starts, that's actually a really significant drop-off. So when you go back toward the property, and I'm not sure, I don't have the exact setbacks on that, but when you go back toward the property, there's a very steep, back behind where the manure was, there's a very steep drop-off, and then it levels out. CFPUA has a pipeline back there, so they do work and clean that out. And then there's Bradley Creek. So there's a natural setback that we would, of course, have to comply with for anything. And then the conservation resource, you can't build within or put structures within a certain number of feet from that. So the back, I think, is covered from your setbacks. And so there are other regulations that we would have to follow as well, sir.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Joyner?
I just want to echo the comments that it sounds like you're doing really good work getting young people outside, getting young people interested in animals. Can't celebrate enough that you're working with the Scouts. My question is, help us make this a little bit less abstract. What is the specific practical need that your client has for this change? I'm all about cleaning up statutes. I mean, I work as an attorney. We want to make statutes simplified, but what is the specific practical need that caused you to bring this?
Sure. So right now, the current code, as I brought up, says that, and I'm sorry, I still need to switch so that we could get the arrow for Ms. Thurston's presentation. The current code says that you don't have to get a zoning permit for agricultural land. What does that mean? What permits do you then have to get? When it was 4th of July, and I remember the well went dry, and Mr. Sosny immediately had to rehouse the horses. So he put up a temporary tent and stables, and you know, and so they were out there with a generator because you had to keep them air conditioned, and they're replacing the well. Typically, you might have to get a permit to do that, to move any sediment, property soils around, those kinds of things. And so it's not clear what, if any, permits you would have to get for a farm. It doesn't really fall into all of the zoning requirements for a residential property. In addition, another issue that we had, not us, and I don't represent Ms. Bean, the other property, but I was here for Board of Adjustment. She had an issue with one of her outbuildings and had to repair it and replace it. She had to go through the entire Board of Adjustment approval process in order to repair one of her farm structures, because I think they were adding a little bit, and the city saw that as an expansion of a non-conforming use. So that, in addition to what counts as a farm use and what counts as agritourism, and are those different, those are just things that we're trying to clean up here with this text amendment and say, you know what, operate your farm as long as you're complying with the stormwater, as long as you're complying with the conservation resources, and you are a bona fide farm. So there are certain criteria that you have to meet. So it can't just be somebody owns property and they say, I want to put a garden out there, and they're subject not to anything. You either have to, you have to have one of these qualifications. So that's what we were trying to clear up, sir.
Ms. Andrews?
That was my question as well, as what was the purpose for the text amendment?
Okay, stay tuned. I will now open up the public hearing. The public hearing will be set for 30 minutes. Each speaker will be allotted 33 minutes to speak. The clerk will give the time, and you state your name and where you live for the record, and the public hearing is open.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Cindy Wolf, and I'm here on behalf of the Gray Marsh Crossing neighborhood. As staff includes in their case summary introduction, criteria for reviewing text amendments shall consider the proposal is consistent with adopted plans and policies and with the stated purpose of the Land Development Code. The purpose section of that Land Development Code states that regulations in the chapter are designed to protect residential neighborhoods from adverse impacts of inappropriate uses. As Catherine pointed out, prior to the recent code update, farms were not even listed as a defined use. Now we have urban farms, and they're permitted by special use permit with prescribed conditions in either residential or commercial districts. So the two existing farms that are there have existed since before regulation, and they've historically been non-impactful jewels of our community. And we thoroughly applaud, just as everyone has, the improvements that have been made at Canterbury Stables and all of the community activities and services that they've highlighted. They've been good neighbors. And they are already a bona fide farm. But we believe that this text amendment is the wrong way to accomplish this. We now have urban farms, and we believe that a text amendment to urban farms would provide for the elephant in the room, which is that exempting bona fide farms from just about all other city regulations would in fact allow carte blanche to the wide range of events without any provisions for mitigation of impacts to surrounding properties. As she defined the agritourism, it includes all kinds of things that can be done on a farm to view or enjoy rural activities. Certainly, farming and all those types of things are rural activities that you can enjoy. But the broad definition includes weddings and other group events. And enough venues for those are few and far between, and so they're profitable to have. Most everyone enjoys a party. There's no denying that the natural surroundings of a farm or something like Canterbury Stables, now that it's fixed up, would be an excellent location and venue for private activities. But the city is an urban area. That use anywhere else in the city is governed by a whole section entitled Residential Compatibility Standards. And in particular, outdoor amplified sound is the primary topic addressed. The city has the noise ordinance, but I'm sure every one of us has had occasion to be imposed upon by some extraneous commotion, whether it be a horn, a car alarm, a barking dog, a neighbor having a party. These are generally short-lived, and sure, there's an enforcement remedy, but it's truly difficult to realistically apply it in all circumstances. An event with amplified sound over the course of a couple hours, even below what is permitted in the decibel level, can still impact daily living on surrounding properties. We believe that the more appropriate text amendment would be to amend the urban farm conditions to include the allowance of events, but with some specific criteria that would provide protections to mitigate potential impacts. Provisions like whether distance separations, enclosures, acoustic controls, or perhaps even time constraints. Canterbury Stables and Adam, they're acting in good faith. We believe them. But unfortunately, we have to evaluate what the potential effect of the approval of this sweeping text amendment might allow in the hands of someone that's not as considerate, that's not as reliable. Does this text amendment satisfy the approval criteria for reasonable consideration of the character of the city's various neighborhoods and the suitability of particular uses of land? The neighborhood believes not. Without controls, the broad interpretation could have far-reaching impacts. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Sappho, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. My name is Lisa Pridgeon, and my mother's name is Marie Butler. Our address is 5625 Surrey Downs Court. Our property is immediately adjacent, runs right up to Canterbury Stables. I'm going to give you a little background on me. I was a child in 1973 that went to Canterbury Stables to take riding lessons. I rode there for a number of years until I grew up, went to college, and wasn't that important. Let's see, where do I start? So you've seen some pictures of what these people have done. To think that they're gonna have a hoedown over there with music blaring, let's think about what they have there. They have prized show horses. They have animals that they take. I want to come back as one of their animals. I'll put it like that. These people are not, the 376 truckloads of manure, that was something to watch. My mother and I sat on the porch and watched them, and we're like, I just couldn't believe it was still there. As far as stewards, and you mentioned an open checkbook, these people have done nothing. They have spent millions of dollars for this piece of property. Miss Agnes Bean has always kept her property at the highest level. As far as noise, my mother and they were there there was a 16th birthday party, I think in May, I can't remember. They had some music. It was over by 10:30. The wedding, they had some music. I'm not sure what time it got over. My mother and I sat on the back porch and couldn't even hear the music per se. So as far as, are you giving them a blank check? No, you're not. They have to adhere to certain noise ordinances. They haven't broke a noise ordinance. They have been harassed by folks trying to, I don't know what they want to do. But noise, my mother and I are there, we hear nothing. Cars, the place is gated. You don't go into that farm unless you have a fob or a code. It's just not running amok, throwing big events. They're not going to do that. They're a farm. They're there to cultivate rural agriculture with farm animals, chickens. My mother and I went, they invite us to everything. They're the best neighbors you could be. My mother's 84. Mr. McKinney, he's taken her for walks, and just excellent people. They have high standards. They have a moral code. You don't undertake what they undertook by refurbishing this farm if you don't care about land and your animals, the animals. That fall festival, there were children that got to hold chickens, got to see eggs. It was just wonderful to watch, just wonderful. Noise, I'm telling you, I want to wait to see when there's a noise problem. I'm still waiting for that. And like I said, right up, there's a fence between us with a gate. So I don't believe that you are giving them carte blanche to do whatever they want. You're not. You're not. And if you think you are, I think they've already proven that they're not going to do that. That's not a for-profit barn. And it's a landmark. That was the first metal building ever erected in New Hanover County, 1969, Linda Shellhart. So they have preserved a beautiful piece of property, and we don't have those in the city. Agnes Bean, oh my God, are you kidding me? What she does, it's just, I mean, sometimes I just ride down Airlie Road so I can look over there. It's so beautiful. I don't know of any hoedowns going down over there either. So I just wanted to give you a perspective of us neighbors that are right there. We're right on top of it. Now, 376 truckloads of manure, that was something to witness. To see that. So that's all I have to say. I hope that you will do the right thing, which what I think is right. I don't think you will regret your decision if you make the one. I hope you will.
Let me just respond to you. When I said a blank check, in all actuality, it's not a blank check, but we don't have the luxury up here of looking at just this one individual. This goes with the land.
Sure.
This forevermore until another council or another applicant comes up and says, I want to do away with this amendment. Until then, Mr. Sosny, and I don't think he will, but they could sell it. The next person could come along and wouldn't be the shining star that you're describing him. I know Adam. I don't disagree with anything you said, but that's why the comments have been made up here tonight. We have to ask those things, and we have to feel comfortable in our mind that that's what's going to happen, because really we won't have an awful lot of leverage with this amendment. So I appreciate your comments, and I'm sure they appreciate you coming up and standing up to the plate for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Hello, my name is Tamara Baxton, and I live in Gray Marsh Crossing. And if you look at the map, the land was cleared close on the right-hand side to the right of the main building, which is where they erected the tent for the wedding that they held. And also the arena faces Gray Marsh Crossing, and that's water. And so both of those events, which weren't permitted, had amplified sound that went across towards Gray Marsh Crossing. And the noise was so loud that I had guests that weekend, and we had to go inside the house from the back porch because we couldn't hold a conversation. So we understand that they've done a lot of great things for the property, and to your point, Mr. Ivanbark, I think the fact that this amendment goes with that property regardless of who the owners are, and that our local community, for both of those outdoor events, and there were only two, we had to call the police in both occasions to come to the event because the noise was so loud and it went a little bit beyond the hours that are authorized. And in both of those cases, we tried to contact the ownership group, and were not able to meet with them to air our concerns. And so our concern is that all we know is what we've experienced, and we don't feel like we have appropriate protections for outdoor amplified sound. That's our only concern, and that's what we're requesting from you, is to put in some guardrails. In the Planning Commission meeting, they requested that, and the applicant did not respond with any considerations for the neighbors. So they may have good relationship with Surrey Downs, but we have no relationship with them, and we are the ones who've expressed concerns and had no response.
Ma'am, when you called the police, did the noise stop?
Pardon?
When you called the police, did the noise stop?
No. And it didn't get turned down.
Didn't get turned down?
And so what we're being subject to is that we're going to have to be calling the police. They say they won't have a lot of events, but we have no idea. We just know the two they had were both issues, and we don't want to be bothering the police, who have a lot more important things to do, when the noise is disturbing. This is a very quiet community. It's on the marsh. There's birds. It's tranquil. We love looking at the horses. You know, we don't mind any of the other activities. We just don't want the amplified sound. That's all I have to say. Appreciate your consideration.
Mr. Spears?
Ma'am, I absolutely understand your concern. But my question to you is, do you know what the decibels are that are legal for a noise ordinance or not?
I mean, we do, and one of our neighbors had a drone and did some readings, and according to him, it was over the limit.
But
So,
you said you called the police and the police went over and they didn't turn the music down, so that would mean to me that they weren't in violation. It was just an annoyance to you and your guests.
my understanding is that not all police officers have devices that can record to tell whether the sound is over the limit. And honestly, the police department didn't return a call after they went and visited the site, so I don't really know what the result of that situation was. I just know that the sound did not decrease after we made the complaints, and there were multiple complaints. I think 3 or 4 neighbors called on both occasions.
Right. So, I mean, I'm just looking at it like glass half full, not half empty, but, you know, I have a neighbor that lives across the street, and he's basically turned his Jeep into a big speaker.
Yeah.
But, you know, we just deal with it. I've known him almost my entire life. And you know, certain times he'll turn it off, but if somebody calls the police on him, he's not going to turn it off.
Right.
But, I mean, it's just how you look at it. Sometimes it's an annoyance. I told him the other day, man, you were playing a song the other day that I forgot about. Thank you for that. So, you know, sometimes it is. It's just that you may not be in the mood for what's happening, and it may be annoying. It may not be illegal. That's the point I'm getting to. It may not be illegal. It may not be over what the noise ordinance is. So it may not require them to turn it down, but, you know.
And
But
that's
go
our
ahead.
concern.
Right.
Is that if those kind of events happen on a regular basis, it's actually operating as a commercial event venue. No other commercial event venue in the city can hold a wedding outdoors with amplified sound. It wouldn't happen. And so this is the difference. We don't care if it's indoors, it's the outdoor amplified sound that we have concerns about.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elise Running. I live in Surrey Downs. I'm the 4th house on the right that you can see on the map. I understand what everybody's saying about the noise. they've had 2 events, you know, slap them on the wrist. They've been told they're trying to do right by everyone. And I said this the last time that I was up here. Yes, we hear noise every single day. We hear the tractors running. We hear the chickens running around talking to each other. They do have a donkey, and its name is Shasta. And Shasta has a best friend, and they have to be together all the time. And when Shasta gets upset, either not close enough to his friend or he's ready to go back in the barn, the brain is absolutely the cutest thing ever. It can't help but bring a smile to your face. So, slap on the wrist. They said we're trying to do the best thing. I appreciate them being there. Hearing all that kind of noise every day, I consider that a gift. Thank you.
If I may just briefly, some of the comments, again, were noise. It's my understanding from the noise ordinance, and Madam City Attorney, if I'm wrong, please correct me. I think there is also a section that says if they don't have a decibel reader, that the police officer in their discretion, if it's unreasonably loud or annoying, if you can hear your neighbor's bass from your bedroom window and it's shaking things, I don't think they need a decibel reader to say that's too much. Is that?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. And so I just did want to point that out as well. In addition, I wanted to point out some of the other uses that are allowed in R15. So as Mr. Sosny said, he's a developer. So of course he's looking at this, you know, what could I put on there? If there were a residence and homes built, they could have a neighborhood clubhouse. And that neighborhood clubhouse, in my neighborhood, one of my daughter's friends had a graduation party. And we had a bunch of 18-year-olds run around using our pool, playing their music, and I'm sure the neighbors who live closest to the pool were really unhappy with the fact that they bought a premium to live close to the clubhouse that day. And another use is a city park. City parks are allowed in R15, and I think you were just here about Greenfield Lake, and that's near residences. And so again, we all have to live with neighbors and noise. We are trying to be the best neighbors we can be, but even if Mr. Sosny sells the place and they keep it as a farm, they still have to comply with the noise ordinance as well. And another thing I did want to point out, the noise ordinance is measured from where the complaint comes from. So there are commercial properties right across the street from us, Triangle Lounge and a couple other properties. And so their noise ordinance, their decibel level is higher. And so the noise is from the complaining property. Wherever it comes from, that's where you look at the 65 versus 75 number. And so, again, we have had events. We now understand that it's an issue, and so, you know, Mr. Sosny doesn't want to have to deal with people calling him and continuing to respond to police complaints as well. So I think that's something that's been addressed. But again, that's 2 incidents out of hundreds. And so to kind of quantify that or figure out what's allowed, what's not, I just think is really redundant when we do have the noise ordinance, and difficult when you're defining agritourism uses. And I think those were the comments. Thank you.
Jordan?
I have a question for the city attorney. The noise ordinance, how is that levied when it is against an individual as opposed to an entity?
So it's levied against the property owner. And so the noise ordinance is paid by the property owner, and then we've got a sliding scale after a certain number of incidents. I believe it's after 3 incidents, then the fines go up and will escalate. But there's no difference between a regular person and an entity as to how the fines get levied. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Madam Clerk, have you received any additional comments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I did receive some additional comments. Alexander Hall expressed support for the text amendment. Kelly Hall made a comment that this was a great venue and it should be shared with everyone. Folks that were in opposition to the text amendment, Eric Lingbig, Whitney Lowe, Samantha Harden, Kristen Stanford, Robbie Collins, Tiffany Thompson, Emma Warren, Matthew Agale, Madison Carlos, and Jennifer Allison, and they will be recorded into the record. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Anything else from council? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Waddell, second by Mayor Pro Tem Barnett. Mr. Waddell, will you please read the consent statement for the record before we open it up for any additional discussion?
I move to approve the amendments to the Land Development Code, find it to be consistent with the relevant policies and the comprehensive plan based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and the staff report, and to find approval of the request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed amendment would help preserve some of the city's few remaining agricultural uses by promoting them as economic and cultural assets.
Okay. Discussion? All right. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes 6-1. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Waddell, second by Councilman Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying Dillon?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item fails for lack of a unanimous vote, so we will hear this at our next city council meeting. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our ordinances. Item 01 is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $150,000 from the tree mitigation plantings projects in the Parks and Recreation Capital Projects Fund for stump and tree removals. And at this time, I will ask council's wishes on the first reading. Or are you going to make a presentation? Is there a presentation?
We are prepared to do a presentation for you if you'd like to hear it.
Please do that. Will you bring?
Amy Beatty, our Parks and Recreation Director, will review it for us.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. This ordinance makes an appropriation from tree mitigation funds for stump grinding and removal, as well as the potential for future tree removals. There's currently a balance of $540,315 in the tree mitigation funds collected from developers as pay-in-lieu funds. This $150,000 would be used to execute a contract to remove 387 stumps within the city limits, including 320 stumps within the 1945 corporate limits. The remaining funds will be used for additional stump grinding and removal as needed to help mitigate against a future backlog of stump removals, as well as for unplanned urgent tree removals. Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Ms. Beatty? Long overdue, Ms. Beatty.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. What are the wishes of council in respect to the ordinance? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Joyner. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Spears, second by Mayor Pro Tem Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We must be having solar flares. Things slow as Christmas. That passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item 02A, which is an ordinance making appropriations of $544,000 to the Parks and Recreation Capital Projects Fund for the Encino Sports Complex. And then item 02B, which is the accompanying resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a change order with TA Loving Company for the Encina Sports Complex in an amount not to exceed $751,000. This time I'd like to recognize City Manager, Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Matt Hart, our Senior Project Manager, will overview these items for us.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Saffo, Mayor Pro Temp, council members. For your consideration is the ordinance and related resolution authorizing the appropriation of $544,000 to the Encino Sports Complex project. The additional appropriation is needed to cover a construction contract change order to TA Loving Company in the amount of $751,000. So on September 18th, 2023, city staff presented to City Council information that the Encino Sports Complex capital project had encountered subsurface challenges that would require sports complex site lighting to be installed using engineered piled foundations. Approval of this ordinance and related resolution will allow the contractor to maintain the schedule and progress needed to hit the target of using the north existing fields in August 2024 for the athletic playing season. Construction of the complex started in January 2023, and the project is approximately 60% complete, with a substantial completion date anticipated late this fall of 2024. So the $544,000 is available through appropriation through a combination of park bond contingency, parks open space payment in lieu funds, parks capital balance interest, debt capacity, and unappropriated interest. In order to execute this contract change order to TA Loving Company, an ordinance making the supplemental appropriation to the Parks and Recreation Capital Fund for the Encino Sports Complex is necessary in the amount of $544,000. The remaining amount needed to execute this contract change order is covered by project contingency funds. This ordinance and resolution is recommended. Any questions?
Okay. Any questions, staff? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you. All right, what are the wishes of the council in respect to the ordinance of the $544,000 to the Parks and Recreation Capital Project Fund for the Encino Sports Complex? We have a motion approved by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Andrews. Discussion, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading on the ordinance? Motion made by Councilmember Reinbark, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. And then the item O2B, which is the resolution authorizing the manager to execute the change order with TA Loving Company for the Encino Sports Complex in amount not to exceed $751,000. We have a motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Barnett, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our resolutions. Item R1 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Wilmington, North Carolina, authorizing the negotiation of an agreement to an installment financing contract in an amount not to exceed $32 million to finance various city projects, including streets, sidewalks, riverwalk, a sports complex, and related property, and providing for certain other related matters thereto. I'm going to go to Mr. Jordan. You want to go first? Thank you, Your Honor.
I've been in court all day, Your Honor.
You elevated me.
I just think if we have something with this large of a dollar amount, I think it would be appropriate for staff to give us at least a brief conversation on the record.
We certainly were planning on doing that. Mary Vigue, our Deputy City Manager, will overview this item. Ms. Moretti is, believe it or not, under the weather. Any of you know Ms. Moretti, she must be very under the weather if she's not here. But Mary will be filling in and providing those comments, and we'll be glad to answer questions.
Thank you, and I apologize for jumping the gun.
And you're good. I will try my best to be the best Jennifer I can be this evening. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Tonight we wanted to give you an overview of the debt issuance and what is included with this financing. Oh, you're good. All right. The 2024 A Series limited obligation bonds will be used to finance various capital improvement projects and refinance the balance of the 2014 A LOBs in an amount not to exceed $32 million. Limited obligation bonds do not require voter approval, as general obligation bonds do. The city's ad valorem taxing power is not pledged as it is with a general obligation bond. The financing instead is secured by payments from the city and what's called a deed of trust. The deed of trust is established pursuant to a bond indenture. The city utilizes 2 deeds of trust which hold collateral for our lobs, a 2005 and a 2012 deed of trust. The 2012 deed of trust will be utilized to secure the 2024A lob issuance. The resolution before you tonight is requesting that City Council call for a public hearing on March 19th for this financing. The public hearing will address the amendment to the 2012 deed of trust to add this financing amount to the indenture, as well as remove the command center from the collateral, as we have vacated that property and we're working on surplusing it soon. Collateral held on the 2012 deed of trust includes several fire stations, the operations center, the police fire training facility, and the 929 Skyline building. So when we look at the projects that are included in the 2024A limited obligation bonds, they include street and sidewalk projects totaling up $15.1 million for various rehab, the Front Street Bridge rehabilitation, and sidewalk projects. It includes the Riverwalk North Marina concrete repairs, Water Street Park bulkhead, and the Encino Sports Complex at $1 million. Tonight's action is to authorize the LOBS and call for the public hearing to be held on March 19th. The LOBS action include authorizing the amendment to the deed of trust, the application to the LGC, authorize the staff to retain the financing team, call for the public hearing, authorize all actions necessary by the city, and direct the notice of the public hearing. March 19th will be the public hearing for this financing, and we'll have a resolution for council to approve us to authorize the issuance of the LOBS, and will also include language to remove the command center from the 2012 deed of trust as collateral. This slide highlights the overall calendar associated with the bond sales and the closing. As mentioned, after the public hearing, we will request City Council's approval. We will go to the LGC on April 2nd, and we will go out for pricing on April 25th, and we'll close in May. And in May, we will also bring back to council the approval of the financing ordinance associated with this. I hope I did it justice, and we'll try to answer any questions that City Council may have.
Mr. Waddell.
This may be a question for once Jennifer is back, and probably just for my edification, but I had this question, I think, last year and forgot to ask it. On the actual resolution under the third whereas, it says that the contracts that were initially in 2012, and we have subsequent amendments to them, are with Wilmington Future, Inc., a North Carolina nonprofit corporation. What is that? Those are who the contracts are with that we're amending.
Are you talking about with the deed of trust, or are you on the, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the resolution that, I mean, I can read the paragraph, but.
I might not be able to answer that question, and
Offline is fine. I would like to know, because these come up, more frequently now, and I'd just like to know who the contract is with and what that entity is.
Okay, we will follow up with you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Further wishes of council in respect to the resolution? May I have a motion approved by Councilmember Waddell, second by Mayor Pro Tem Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to item R2, which is a resolution amending the street and facility naming, renaming, and private memorials policy to allow for the acceptance of donated park furniture. This time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Mr. Mayor, we'll call Amy Beatty back to the podium to overview this item for us.
Good evening again. As the title states, this resolution would amend a policy adopted by City Council in 2021 that prohibits the placement by privately donated entities of art displays and sculptures on city property. The adopted policy as written has the unintended consequence of prohibiting the acceptance of park furnishings such as benches from citizens desiring to honor loved ones in memoriam. Having such a bench donation program is common throughout the state of North Carolina. Adoption of this resolution would allow such a program to be offered, subject to the approval by the city manager and in accordance with a park furniture donation administrative procedure. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Are there any questions, Ms. Beatty? Okay, thank you, Amy. What are the wishes of council in respect to the item? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Rivenbark, second by Councilmember Andrews. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to item R3, which is a resolution authorizing an upset bid process for surplus property located at 1502 Wellington Avenue. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Aubrey Parsley, our Director of Economic Development, will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Again, for your consideration tonight is another authorization of an upset bid process, this time for 1502 Wellington Avenue, as was previously mentioned. To start, I just wanted to show you whereabouts in the city this property was located. The nearest landmark is the hospital, and the main thoroughfare there is South 17th Street, which is just a few minutes from the hospital to the southwest. Here are several photos of the property from the street elevation, the first being along Wellington Avenue and then a view from Flint Drive. The property is on the corner of Flint Drive and Wellington Avenue. Here are one additional front view here on the left, and then interior warehouse area is how it was referred to in the appraisal. This is where the city used to house the old fire engines when it was indeed a fire station not too long ago. A couple photos of the interior as well, just so the condition of the property is known to council. So a little bit of history and review of characteristics of the property. This is former fire station number 5. It was vacated by the fire department when the new station off Shipyard Boulevard was built. After fire moved out, the property was repurposed for the Engineering Project Management Division in 2019. The building is just shy of 50 square feet on just shy of half an acre of land. The space breaks down in about 3,400 square feet of office space, and then the garage, which the fire engines used to be located, is about 2,500 square feet. The zoning in the area is O&I, so given the characteristics of the building with the large garage and about 60-40 office to garage and the zoning of O&I, it is a bit of an oddball property in terms of finding an end user. One item I would point out to council is that the ownership change will trigger a change of use, which for practical purposes means the new owner would have to modify the driveways. The driveways were originally designed to accommodate large fire trucks. That is obviously no longer the case there, and once a new owner takes possession, the driveways would have to conform with the current code. Installation of sidewalks on Flint Street and Wellington Avenue would also be required. We did get the property appraised as is without upfits or improvements. We did receive that here recently on middle of January of this year. The property did appraise for $590,000 and is on the tax rolls presently for just under $800,000. The next slide here is just a review of the upset bid process. I know we've seen that a bit here recently, but just for the benefit of folks who might be interested in placing a bid, and just as a refresher for council, the vote tonight would be to accept the current offer before council and initiate the upset bid process. So it would start the process and allow for other bids to come in. If council were to vote to authorize the initiation of the bid, staff would publish a notice and then seek additional bids to come in. If no bids come in, no further council action is required, if another bid does come in that's eligible and competes with this existing, or excuse me, the initial bid proposed tonight, a subsequent council action would be required to approve that subsequent bid. So the timeline for this upset bid process, again, if approved by council tonight, would look as so. Staff would post a legal notice here just in a couple days following tonight's presentation, and we'd make the bid form available on our website. The statutorily required legal notice would be released in print on the 26th. Bids would be due by 3 p.m. on March 7th, and that March 7th date is where the timeline split here. If the city were to receive a bid, then we would have another subsequent notice published, a subsequent bid process, and that would continue to take place until bids were no longer received. If no additional bids were received on March 7th, that would then allow us to countersign the bid that's been offered and proceed toward close, which would be have a deadline of approximately June 6th. So the bid amount that's been proposed is $525,000. The bidder is DazTech Promotions / Johns Petrino. It is an as-is, where-is sale with conveyance via quitclaim deed. There is no due diligence period. That 5% goes hard as soon as the bid is executed. There would be 90 days to close, and again, council may reject the current bid or subsequent bids if tonight's bid is accepted. To place a bid for the benefit of the public or those who might be interested in bidding on the property, we would post a bid form online at the website you see here, wilmingtonnc.gov/bids, and a hard copy of that bid template specific to this property would be available at the Skyline Center, 929 North Front Street. The second bullet just shows the language that's required to submit an eligible bid. You can't just raise the bid by $1. There's a statutory requirement of 10% of the first 1,000 and 5% of the remainder. The deposit must be a money order or certified check in the amount of at least 5%, and delivery of the bid must take place to the clerk's office in a sealed envelope. I'm happy to answer any questions council may have on this item.
Any questions, council? Okay, pretty clear.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. What are the wishes of council in respect to the resolution? I have a motion to approve by Councilmember Andrews, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. It brings us to item R4, which is a resolution authorizing the lease of real property at 929 North Front Street to Link Incorporated. At this time, I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Parsley will overview this item as well.
Hello again. A quick presentation on this item. This is a resolution, just as the title states, to authorize a lease to Link for just over 700 square feet on the 4th floor of the Skyline Center. The initial term of the lease that we're requesting council authorize is 3 years, with one option to extend for an additional 3 years. The rent for the space in the initial year will be in the amount of $23,400 annually, and with council's approval, staff would seek to execute a lease under these key terms in the days or weeks ahead. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions from council? All right. Hearing none, then I'll ask the wishes of the council. I've got a motion from Charlie Robinbach and seconded by Luke. All those in favor are known by the sign aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Thank you. That brings us to item R5, which is a resolution authorizing the lease of real property at 929 North Front Street to the local government Federal Credit Union. Mr. Parsley.
For the third act.
One additional item for your consideration here is a lease to the local government Federal Credit Union, this time for 3,022 square feet on the first floor of the Skyline Center at 929 North Front Street. The initial term we're requesting on this item is 5 years, with one option to extend for 4 years. Rent for the space will amount to $132,349 annually. With council's approval, staff would seek to execute a lease under these key terms in the days or weeks ahead. Any questions that could be helpful to answer?
Do we, I guess we do know where they're going to be located.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Very good. Parking lot, okay. All right, thank you. We have a motion approved by Councilman Reinbark, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our reports. Item RP1 is council's appointments committees for boards, commissions, and committees. And Councilmember Charlie Reinbark, who is the chairman of that committee, will make that presentation. Mr. Reinbark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. Swallowed wrong. The date of the meeting with appointments to the boards and commissions and committees was February the 5th, and those in attendance were Councilmember Luke Waddell and Councilmember Celeste Andrews. Excuse me.
Go ahead.
I'd offer up to the council the following recommendations. For the Convention Center Advisory Committee, reappoint Kim Huffam, representing the Convention Visitors Bureau, with a term to expire December 7th, 2026, and reappoint Natalie English, representing the Chamber of Commerce, with a term to expire December 30, 2026. The Historic Preservation Commission, reappoint Chris Yermel, with a term to expire January 8th, 2028. Encino Sports Park User Group Advisory Committee, it's a recommendation to accept the recommended language for the youth football position to be a member with documented association of providing broad-based community youth football programming, and also to appoint Amy Beatty, Director of Parks and Recreation Department, to serve as an ex officio member. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, appoint Rhonda Waterhouse with a term to expire December 7, 2026, and with the Sister City Commission, appoint Kristen Peoples, representing the Chamber of Commerce, with a term to expire September 1, 2026. And at this time, I'd like for Council Member Celeste Andrews to read for the record some of the commissions that we've not been able to fill, and hopefully somebody out there listening, it would get their attention and decide to come aboard. Celeste?
Thank you. So we have for the Encino Sports Park User Group Advisory Committee, we need a youth football program representative and a Parks and Rec Advisory Committee representative to the Encino Sports Park User Group Advisory Committee. And for the City County Community Relations Advisory Committee, we have a long-time opening for a representative from the business community. And for the joint City of Wilmington, New Hanover County Workforce Housing Advisory Committee, we need a member from the financial, a representative from the financial community. And from the Sister City Commission, we have a longstanding opening for somebody from the New Hanover County Schools. There's many more opportunities coming open, and those you can find on wilmingtonnc.gov under the city clerk and under boards and commissions. You'll see a page that looks like this that has all of the openings coming up, and then you can go find out anything that you're interested in, and there'll be a form right there that you can fill out, and we'd love to have you join any of these commissions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, I offer those up for...
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Councilmember Spears. We have a second to that by Councilmember Andrews. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. This concludes the regular agenda. Are there any items to be brought forward by our city attorney?
No, sir.
City manager?
No, sir.
Madam Clerk? Mr. Waddell? I'm sorry, Mr. Joyner?
No.
Mr. Waddell? Mr. Barnett?
Yes, just want to share with the city that we lost a real close friend to youth, Mr. Lenny Simpson. He passed away. He'll be funeralized on Saturday at 11 o'clock at the Port City Community Church. Pray for him and his family, as well as the kids who were involved in the One Love tennis program. He did a tremendous job with them, and we pray that program will just continue to go.
Very good. Mr. Reinbark?
No, sir.
Ms. Andrews?
I want to say happy birthday to Wilmington.
Yeah.
We are 285 years old today, founded February 20th of 1739, and so there's a little bit of time left in the day to celebrate Wilmington's 285th birthday.
Very good. Mrs. Spears?
Yes, sir. Want to say happy birthday. Councilman Barnett and I had the pleasure of attending a birthday celebration for Miss Posey Johnson, 100 years old, on Saturday. And I would also like to say rest in peace to longtime New Hanover County Magistrate Foster Pelham, who passed on yesterday. I remember when Pelham was a UNCW officer, I was a young kid, and he would ride me around in the UNCW police car. And just gone too soon, but great man, so rest in peace, Pelham.
I want to just insert one thing into the record, and the clerk had reminded me, I missed something during the public hearing number 1 that I want to insert into the record, even though the council members have received everything online that the clerk had sent over to be consistent with what I did on PH2. I would like to read into the record to make certain that those folks that were in opposition or for that particular item be read into the record. If you would, please, Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I received written comments for folks on PH1 Ordinance 6120 Oleander Drive. Opposition, Jean Fitzgibbons, Nicolette Steenberg, Margaret Cooker, Ashley Rice, Penny Miller, Tamara Walser, Sharon Hilton, Elizabeth Kane, and Raphael Torrio. The only one that submitted a form in favor was Matt Scar. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So with that, thank you for taking an interest in your government. We stand adjourned.